The May 20th, 2019 meeting of the Anne Arundel County Council is now in session. Please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilwoman Lacey will lead us in the invocation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I would just ask that we all take a moment of silence to reflect on why we're here tonight and the civic values that we all hold. Thank you.
Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening again, everyone. Madam Secretary, could you please read the ethics statement?
The Ethics Commission has asked that I advise you that under certain circumstances, members of the public may qualify as lobbyists when they testify before the County Council. If so, the law requires that certain information be filed with the Ethics Commission. The Chairman of the Ethics Commission has asked that those present review the Ethics Commission information in the foyer of these chambers. If there are any questions about lobbying requirements, speakers should contact the Ethics Commission in the Heritage Office Complex on Riva Road.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Invitation to audience. We will now invite members of the audience who signed up before the meeting to address the council briefly on any subject not included in the printed agenda. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. We're going to ask the following people to come up to the table, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 2 minutes. I have so far Delaney Harmon and Mr. John Wells. If you would come forward, please. Ms. Harmon, whenever you're ready. Name and address in 2 minutes. Thank you.
My name is Delaney Harmon. I live at 8341 Oakwood Road in Millersville. I am 9 years old and I go to school at Southgate Elementary. I'd like to talk to you tonight about education. My favorite subject in school is writing and reading. I like it because I really love to tell stories. When I grow up, I would like to work for NASA, sorry. That means I need the best schools in Maryland. Right now, we don't have that. Our classrooms have too many kids and our teachers don't make enough money. I know that there are kids in the county that are in classrooms with over 40 students. We need you to work hard and fix that. I need you to invest in my future. Please fund our schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming out. Mr. Wells?
John Wells, 11 Tucker Street, Annapolis. Thanks for that great introduction. I'm here to talk about probably the only person you're going to hear saying I'm for higher taxes provided there for education and police and fire. I think as a senior on fixed income, I look at all investments very carefully. And if you look at the investment in education and the potential impacts, to me the most important thing is keeping the best and brightest teachers. These teachers not only teach information, they pass on the wish for learning. And this is something that stays with those children all their lives, as you know. Looking at, as an economist, at the spending itself, not all spending is equal. Some has extra multiplier effects, and certainly education is one of those areas. These multiplier effects resonate throughout the economy, and they also influence the whole nature of the county, the quality of life. Well-educated people believe in health insurance. They're less likely to get sick and be a burden. There's many studies on the relationship between crime and education, higher education, less crime. Businesses tend to choose graduates that not only have degrees in higher education, but are from institutions that have good reputations. And with the help of their quality teachers, our students will have much higher chances of getting a better job, therefore paying higher taxes to the county for many years to come. Most important for me is that we'll be creating a quality of life here in the county that will continue to attract our own children and grandchildren to live here where they grew up. They may not be the best and brightest relative to other children or adults, But with a little help from the great school system we have, they'll surely be the best and brightest that they can be. And to me, that's the most important thing. All the positive impacts could go on. I did some reading before this, and it's quite a long list. But
Mr. Wells, can you please summarize the...
I will. I'm summarizing
Thank
right
you.
now. I think this money is well spent, and the reading that I've done says that the organization that spends it is as important as what it's spent on. And I appreciate the county's openness in all this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. Thank you to both of you for coming forward. You're dismissed. Is there anyone who did not sign up, wish to speak, to come up to the table and state your name and address for the record? Again, this is for invitation to audience on items that are not on the agenda. Ms. Johnson?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. I'm back again, and I do need your help. I sent you an email today with some photos that gives you some idea of some of my experiences, particularly in the late 90s and early 2000s, with 3 different properties that I own. In one, my neighbor threatened my life and chased me off my property. When I tried to have, one time, I tried to have their vehicle, one vehicle towed. And within a week or 10 days, the daughter and the family, we heard noise, and we went downstairs, and across the street, there was the daughter in the family with a weapon that looked like a long gun, and there were 5 holes in my window and screen. And when we checked it out, they all pointed to where she was standing. The police were no help. With another property up in Harold Harbor, you see an aerial photograph where the neighbors came in with 60-foot cranes, timbering equipment, trucks and crews, and they took out many trees. And Great Aunt Matilda, in 1924, bought these 4 little lots up in Harold Harbor, and we treasured them and nurtured them because they were a natural area. And when other family members said, do you want to buy them? I said, yes, because there's time is going to come when there aren't going to be any woods and forests and the mosses and the ferns and the worms and the cool things to take into class. And these people ravaged it. There was a stolen tree chipper worth between $20,000 and $30,000 they stored on my property. And once again, no help. The third one, during all of this chaos, was next door to another property, and the
Ms. Johnson, could you please summarize?
Sure.
Yeah.
That neighbor built an addition to his house, and how am I going to do lawsuits and all of this? And there are officials, and I need help. And if it happens to me, I know that it happens to other folks.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Seeing no other movement in the audience, the invitation to audience is now closed. Is there any item any council member would like to place on the agenda that's not listed?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to request to be added as a co-sponsor to 2819, please.
Madam Secretary, can we do that? Okay, just want to confirm. Also, the applicant in Bill or Resolution 2119 requests to have their name withdrawn, so the administration is withdrawing Resolution number 2119 as introduced. So that was no longer on our agenda. Any other agenda changes? Thank you. May I have a motion that the partial reading of any bill, resolution, amendment to a bill, or resolution or minutes constitutes the reading of the whole?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, the motion carries. Approval of minutes. Madam Secretary, please bear with me here. Please read the minutes of May 1st, May 3rd, May 6th, May 7th, May 8th, May 9th, May 10th, and May 13th, 2019.
And bear with me. The meeting, May 1st, 2019, the meeting was called to order by Chairman Andrew Pruski at 11 a.m. and opened with the invocation given by Reverend Jason Poling, St. Andrew's Episcopal Church, Pasadena, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. May 3, 2019. The meeting was called to order by Chairman Andrew Pruski at 11 a.m. and opened with the invocation given by Councilwoman Lisa Rodvian, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. May 6, 2019. The meeting was called to order by Chairman Pruski at 1 p.m. and opened with the invocation given by Ms. Hare, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. May 7, 2019. The meeting was called to order by Chairman Andrew Pruski at 1 p.m. and opened with the invocation given by Councilwoman Allison Pickard, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. May 8, 2019. The meeting was called to order by Chairman Andrew Pruski at 9 a.m. and opened with the invocation given by Mr. Volke, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. May 9, 2019. The meeting was called to order by Vice Chairman Allison Pickard at 1 p.m. and opened with the invocation given by Ms. Fiedler, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. May 10, 2019. The meeting was called to order by Chairman Andrew Pruski at 1 p.m. and opened with the invocation given by Councilwoman Lisa Rodvian, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. May 13, 2019. The meeting was called to order by Chairman Andrew Pruski at 7 p.m. and opened with the invocation given by Ms. Hare, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
And Mr. Chairman, I believe I have to correct a statement. On May 3rd, 2019, the meeting was called to order at 1 o'clock.
Okay, as corrected. Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of May 1st, May 3rd, May 6th, May 7th, May 8th, May 9th, May 10th, and May 13th, 2019?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. The minutes of May 1st, 3rd, 6th, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 13, 2019 stand approved as read. Thank you, everybody, for your patience with that. Madam Secretary, please read the title of the bills to be introduced this evening.
Bill number 4719, an ordinance concerning finance, taxation, and budget, real property taxes, stormwater management credit. Bill number 4819, an ordinance concerning planning and development, master plan for water supply and sewerage systems. Bill number 4919, an ordinance concerning subdivision and development, community meetings, notice. Bill number 5019, an ordinance concerning zoning, farm breweries.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please read the title of the resolutions to be introduced this evening.
Resolution number 2019, resolution approving the reappointment of Brian E. Riddle as a supervisor for Anne Arundel Soil Conservation District. Resolution number 2219, resolution approving the recommendation that Billy Penley continue to serve as acting health officer. Resolution 2319, resolution confirming a nomination to the Board of Trustees of the Public Library Association of Annapolis and Anne Arundel County, Incorporated.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We will now hold a public hearing on the constant yield tax rate. We have Haji Wasim will come speak. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the County Council, for the record, I'm Huja Hasim, County Assistant Budget Officer. Thank you for the opportunity to kick off tonight's fiscal year 2020 constant yield property tax rate hearing. Section 2-205 of the Property Tax Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland requires the State Department of Assessment and Taxation to certify to all taxing authorities a constant yield property tax rate, which will produce the same revenue in the coming year that was produced in the prior taxable year, exclusive of new construction. The law further provides that if the taxing authority intends to establish a tax rate greater than the constant yield tax rate, it must advertise and hold a public hearing. An advertisement was placed by the County Council in the local newspaper, which adheres to the procedures required by the state law and was reviewed and approved by the State Department of Assessment and Taxation. Anne Arundel County's constant yield rate per $100 of taxable assessment for fiscal year 2020 are certified by the State Department of Assessment and Taxation as follows: 88.89 cents for the county, excluding Annapolis and Highland Beach, 52.93 cents for the Annapolis, and 86.05 cents for Highland Beach. The fiscal year 2020 proposed budget increases the real property tax rate from 92.3% cents to 93.5 cents per $100 of assessment for the county, excluding the city of Annapolis and Highland Beach. This rate is 5.2% higher than the constant yield rate of 88.89 cents and will generate $31.3 million additional property tax revenue above the constant yield amount. Additionally, the fiscal year 2020 county tax rate applicable to the city of Annapolis real property is similarly increased from 52.1 cents to 56.1 cents per $100 of assessment in the proposed budget. The rate is 6% higher than the constant yield rate of 52.93 cents and will generate $1.9 million in additional property tax revenue above the constant yield amount. Finally, for the Highland Beach, the fiscal year 2020 county real property tax rate has increased from 87.2 cents to 90.5 cents per $100 of assessment in the proposed budget. This proposed rate is 5.2% more than the constant yield tax rate of 86.05 cents and will generate $14,340 more in property taxes than the constant yield amount. As required by law, this public hearing has been scheduled. Thank you and good evening.
Thank you so much, Mr. Asim. The County Council will set the property tax rate for Anne Arundel County, the City of Annapolis, and the Town of Highland Beach at a meeting beginning at 9 a.m. on Friday, June 14, 2019, in these chambers. The rate may exceed the constant yield tax rate. We will now take the opportunity to open up the public hearing. Remarks are going to be limited to 2 minutes, and anybody that we have sign up, and of course, after we'll have that piece. Just a reminder, as you come forward, state your name and address in 2 minutes, and then at the end of 2 minutes, I'll ask you to summarize. I respectfully ask just to finish your thought, not go on for another 2 minutes, because we want to give everybody a chance to be heard. On the sheet that I have Mr. Irvin. You're first, sir, and you just come and state your name and address in 2 minutes.
Sure.
Yeah, right down the table.
Sorry about that. First time here.
That's okay.
Lifetime resident, but first time at the council. Ed Irvin, 62 Hull Avenue, Annapolis, Maryland, 21403. And I am basically wanted to come. My father was heavily involved in the property tax cap that was enacted back in 1992. I'm here basically because I have 2 points, and then maybe I should have done it at the beginning, but I'll just sort of go through it. It'll be less than 2 minutes. First point I wanted to make was I went back to fiscal year 2005. Looks like to me the property tax revenue was $400,944,486 back then. The last actual I could get would be actual, and that would be fiscal year 2016. That's up to $629,091,741. That's an increase of $228,147,255, $228 million. That's in less than 9 years. That's actual. The local income tax went from 2005 fiscal year, $308,536,927. It's now up to $456,192,055. That's up 2% based on the whole general fund. Long and short of it, it's up about $147,655,128. That's a tremendous amount of increase in 9 years. I picked that up off the county website. Those were the budget summaries. I couldn't really make sense of going through the whole budget because that's a lot. Long and short of it, I just want you all to realize that you guys are going against the will of the voters by going forward with doing this sort of, in my opinion, council, it was something that was enacted by the voters. I definitely support Councilman Volke for finally stepping up and saying, look, this is something that should be done to the voters. Allow the voters to speak their will.
Ms. Irvin, do you want to just summarize?
I think I said what I wanted to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Yep.
Is there anyone else who did not sign up and wishes to speak on the constant yield tax rate? your name and address, and then 2 minutes, and Madam Secretary will give you a sheet
Okay.
to sign in.
My name is Laura Day, and I live at 7739 Acrocomia Drive, Hanover, Maryland, in District 1. I'm the second person that's going to say that I actually appreciate the ability to pay a little bit more taxes to get the things that we need as a community to make us safer, to strengthen our education, to have firefighters that don't need to sue to get paid. In 1992 was the will of the voters. I'm a 20-year resident of Anne Arundel County. I wasn't here in 1992, and I just graduated high school. So this voter didn't vote. In that time, I raised a voter. He didn't get to vote. My husband didn't get to vote. There have been countless people that have come into this county that didn't get a say in this tax cap. Also, he talked about increases, and that's great, but just as a point of comparison, in 1992, $40 would buy an entire cart of groceries. And think about what each of you spend weekly at the grocery store now. I think that the time has come to do this, especially for education, which is in fact worth it, and we have been sorely used by the last county executive. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Seeing no other movement in the audience, the public hearing is now closed for the constant yield tax rate, so we will now move forward. As I stated as a reminder, at 9 a.m. on Friday, June 14th in these chambers is when the meeting will be to decide that. Moving along with the agenda, we'll now consider an act on a resolution number 2219. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Resolution 2219.
Resolution number 2219, resolution approving the recommendation that Billy Penley continue to serve as acting health officer.
Okay, I know we're waiting for the administration. And just to be clear, we do not need to suspend the rules as a parliamentary procedure. This is an appointment. We may move to proceed, so I know somebody may have asked that earlier. But Mr. Barron, whenever you're ready to proceed.
Sure. Thank you, and good evening. Appreciate there are better lawyers than I involved. Joining me at the table is Ms. Kenny from Office of Law. My name is Pete Barron with the County Executive. As this council knows, Fran Phillips went back to work for the State Department of Health last fall. She was our acting health officer at that time. Ms. Billy Penley stepped up. We have been without a full permanent health officer since I believe June 1st in 2017. The administration is committed to making sure that we get this process right. When I was before the council a few months back, I was a little more optimistic that we would be moving quicker, but I do want to say that we are moving forward. The county executive is committing to make sure that we get a permanent health officer in soon, but we are not rushing it. Councilwoman Fiedler has been gracious enough to serve on a search committee as we are vetting and looking for a permanent health officer. And I do want to state for the record that Ms. Penley has done a fantastic job. She was in front of you on the budget. All of you know how important this department is to the county, and we're committed to making sure we get this right. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barron. Is there any discussion? Councilman Volke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Barron, good evening.
Good evening.
Quick question for you. The administration, obviously, I see has put an end date on this, so the issue that we had with the last one that was amended looks like that's taken care of. But I did want to ask, is this sort of a nationwide search that you all are conducting? Is that the scope of sort of the review?
I know there have been applicants from out of state. I haven't been personally involved in the advertising, but I know they advertised it. So they are looking and vetting candidates all over.
Okay. And in the event that you find someone out of state that is the best qualified applicant, does the administration anticipate paying for relocation expenses for that individual?
That would be a discussion that they would negotiate at that time.
Okay. And does the administration have a policy or a position on paying relocation expenses for department heads?
That's negotiated.
Okay. Do you know if the county has a policy on that?
I am not aware.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 2219.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Resolution number 2219 is adopted.
Okay, Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 2319 as amended.
Bill number 2319, an ordinance concerning public works, Heritage Harbor condominium phases 1 through 10 water and wastewater petition, front foot benefit assessment.
Okay, Mr. Barron, administration, I see some folks are coming forward. Whenever you're ready.
Sure. Good evening again. Pete Barron with the administration. With me at the table is Ms. Karen Henry and Ron Bigerman from DPW. And sticking with me is Ms. Kenny from Office of Law. If you recall, we discussed this piece of legislation, 2319, at the last meeting. Heritage Harbor, 6 Cloves, has petitioned the county to take over its water and sewer lines. This is a 106 unit owners and 53 duplex style homes. The way the condo association works is folks pay an equal proportion for all the maintenance, common grounds, roads, non-utility infrastructure. So they petition the county to assess change the assessment instead of based on front footage, but to an equal share per every unit. There was an amendment at the previous meeting. With that, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Okay, seeing no questions. I do not have anyone signed up for this bill, but we're going to open up the public hearing. I don't know if there's anyone who'd like to come forward to testify on Bill 2319. Okay, well, the public hearing on Bill 2319 as amended is now closed. Is there any further discussion? Sorry, Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 2319 as amended first.
Bill number 2319, an ordinance concerning public works, Heritage Harbor condominium phases 1 through 10, water and wastewater petition, front foot benefit assessment.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Any further discussion on this bill? Okay, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill 2319 as amended.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 2319 is passed.
Thank you all. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 2419 as amended.
Bill number 2419, an ordinance concerning personnel and purchasing employee and retiree health benefits program.
Okay, Mr. Barron, I know there's a few folks coming up here, so whenever they get settled, you can say.
Sure. Pete Barron with the administration. Joining me at the table is Mr. Tyler, Ms. Dickerson, and, sorry. No, sorry, hey. So 2419 is to revise certain provisions of the code. If you recall, we had heard this bill last meeting. There were a couple of amendments, and I want to thank Legislative Counsel and the advocates and Mr. Tyler. Everybody rushed to get some amendments done at the last meeting. I just want to highlight how big and major the progress is. This administration worked very hard to bring everybody together, sit at the table, and make sure that labor has a voice moving forward. This bill, as amended, we believe addresses those concerns, and we ask the council to move favorably.
Okay, any further discussion? Councilman Volkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure who to direct this to, but again, I'll ask the question I've been asking for, I would say, the better part of 2 months. What's the cost? What is this going to ultimately cost us if we settle this case versus taking this to court and whatever the outcome may be?
I mean, if you're asking
whether or not we should roll the dice and go to court, I want to remind you that these are county employees. We are not negotiating with people that rear-ended us in a car accident. These are folks that work for the county and in many times put their lives and bodies on the line for us. As I understand it, and I think it's better to get a specific answer from budget, as we've discussed before, but the cost here is right now what was in the previous bill 8513, which required the lowest cost, never got into place. So currently things will stay the same. In the next round of negotiation, I mean, you know this, healthcare costs are going up. So maybe it'll keep going up. Maybe it'll, folks in DC down the road will actually get their act together and do something, and costs will go down. So if you're looking for my crystal ball, I don't have it.
I keep looking for that crystal ball. It sounds to me, and I don't want to pontificate on this, but it sounds to me like no one has a definitive answer, because I've asked budget, I don't have a definitive answer. I know personnel I've gone back and forth on this one. I've asked you. So, I mean, I guess that's my question, is it really sounds like no one knows exactly what this is going to cost, but everyone thinks this is the right thing to do. Am I getting that right?
And I'll defer, Mr. Tyler looks like he wants to say something. Sure. But I do want to say, we will all sit around the table and discuss and agree to what the health benefits look like. Okay. And so it will be known and it will be brought to the council at that time.
And in the event that you all can't agree, then at that point, because of what this bill is doing, it'll all be subject to binding arbitration. True?
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, but I'm not sure we can quantify it at this point. Or, as Mr. Barron said, I mean, health costs are probably going to go up just as a result of health costs going up. But we're not able to quantify that portion which is attributable to this bill, that these benefits are negotiable. And I'm not sure we will be able to at that point.
Let me ask you this, because I think you were around and familiar with the 8513 debate. And at that time, you know there were a number of outside actuaries who were engaged by the county, and all of those actuaries came in and made recommendations basically of what the county would save if 8513 was enacted. So there was some sort of fiscal analysis that was able to be done by the right people. And I guess my question to the administration and sort of generally is, if that was able to be done before on the savings side, how is that not able to be done looking forward? I mean, I just find it to be a tough answer to say that there's no way that we can project it because everything's just going to cost more.
Because I'm not sure there's going to be any change at this point. We have great health care. The employees like the health care. In discussions with the union representatives, they didn't have any specific complaints about portions of our health care that said, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that, and this is going to cost more. Maybe there would be some tweaking down the road through some give and take. But right now we have great health care. And the savings, I think Mr. Barron alluded to, that those savings never took effect because the bill never took effect.
Right. Because so it was enjoined once the circuit court action started.
Correct. So we're not losing that money moving forward.
Right. We never saved it. We simply just kept doing what we were always doing. So there's never actually been any cost savings under 8513 in that regard.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hare?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question. On page 4, I guess it is, H13, it says that the estimate of annual costs will be prepared by the personnel officer, it's presented, discussed jointly, et cetera, and then it's approved by the resolution of the county council. What happens if the county council doesn't approve the resolution?
I'm not aware that it's ever happened before, but I don't know. Then maybe the rates that are currently in effect stay in effect. That means you wouldn't change the rates for the 2020 calendar year.
So at some level, do I understand that the county council would still have final approval over this fiscal impact at some point? I feel like there's a hole in here where we don't know what happens if the county council says that's too much of a fiscal impact for this year after it's been discussed, presented.
The resolution that will be before you later this summer is actually for the premium rates for the employees and the employer and employer subsidy based on claims of the past year and the trends. It's not anything that's been negotiated with the unions. This is just part of the cost sharing for healthcare.
Do we know what those are already?
We do not. We are working with the consultants now to finalize those.
Okay, but so there is sort of this kind of gap. We don't know what would happen if the county council did not approve the resolution that you all bring forth.
But this is normal practice.
It's been normal practice. That part is not new in the law. That has been in existence since
Okay.
8513.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, seeing no further questions, we want to open this up for a public hearing. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. This is on Bill number 2419. I do not have anyone signed up, but if there's anybody who'd like to come forward, please do so now. Okay, cool.
Good evening.
Yes.
Brian Atkinson here on behalf of the Anne Arundel County Healthcare Coalition. I was actually signed up on the representatives list to appear in reference to this bill. And there's a couple things that I wanted to kind of just point out. One, everyone agrees that health insurance is vitally important to our county employees. The unions over the years have made sizable concessions to our health care benefits, to include reduced subsidies. We've accepted higher co-pays, deductibles, and costs for emergency room visits. This was all done through negotiations, through the negotiations process over the years. These concessions resulted in savings for the county, and they were all negotiated. With 2419, we returned to collaboration to give everyone a seat at the table, to review, discuss, and bargain how to provide and fund employee health insurance to our employees. It's time to put this battle to rest. I would like to remind Mr. Volke, I hope we have your support on this bill. Prior to the election, you did state that I certainly believe that health insurance benefits are part of the total compensation package, and all plans and options should be put on the table in and during contract negotiations and collective bargaining. I believe that's all we're doing today, and I believe that the county will benefit. I was here at the last meeting, and Legislative Counsel was absent at the beginning of the meeting because she, the Office of Law, the representatives from the council, the Office of Personnel, the Office of Law, the Healthcare Coalition, were all in a room here at the Arundel Center working on making sure that our retirees were protected through this legislation. I have to tell you that that made me feel good, not only as a union head, as the head of our coalition, but also as a county employee and a tax-paying citizen of Anne Arundel County. I hope that is a representative of things to come. It certainly is important, and I cannot tell you the benefit that that brings to not only me, but all county employees. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Askin.
Mr. Chairman, I just
Yes.
want to point out that the 2 minutes does not apply to Mr. Atkinson or to Mr. Smith. They are indeed listed as, they should have been up at the table
Reps,
as
absolutely.
representatives.
Per
So this
council
is
rules.
not,
Thank you.
They are not doing public testimony.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Joel Smith. I'm with the firm of Conn, Smith & Conn in Baltimore. I speak in favor of 2419 once again. I've appeared before you. I think this is the third time, actually, that I've appeared before you about this bill, and I appreciate that courtesy and opportunity. To take a shot at answering, in part, your question, Councilman Volke, one of the things that many people do not understand in terms of healthcare with large organizations like the county is the county self-funds or self-insures the costs and risk of healthcare. Therefore, each year, in establishing the costing of healthcare, it uses its actuaries and consultants to look at the costs of providing healthcare, the experience and expenses that have incurred in the period before, and determined, looking in a crystal ball, as it were, that they do year in, year out, what the expansion of costs are going to be generally in the economy. And that number is rendered and presented to the administrator of the plan, and that's why this county, like every other county, has the process of attempting to fix or estimate the cost, which produces the pricing. In other words, how much the county is going to appropriate and how much employees are going to be asked to pay in each annual plan cycle. In the process of bargaining over that, or bargaining over process, we often talk about ways to save money, because employees as well as employers are very interested in trying to reduce costs in the production of health care. And this particular piece of legislation, the mechanics of it, are designed to enable the trading of information to seasonably and timely permit that information to be shared. The difference between where we are now and where we were with the bill that was passed in 2015 is that that bill permitted the county to fix its costs based on the lowest cost plan. And the Court of Special Appeals held that that is not permissible, that that is an overreaching by the county in trying to define the scope of bargaining. The other thing the court, of course, held is that health care is a mandatory subject of bargaining. So that's why we're here in attempting to strike a compromise between process and result in an attempt to allow the parties who are stakeholders to sit at the table and modulate health care and try to manage it appropriately. That's just an opportunity to try to answer your question. I join with others saying, no, I can't tell you what the exact dollar amount is, but I think process is at least as important, if not more important, than actually what the cost estimates are going to be, because that's a way or a mechanism of trying to limit costs going on year in and year out. Any other questions?
No, we do have you, Councilwoman Radvian, and then Councilwoman Hare.
I would want to ask for any of you, would you say it's fair that the ability to negotiate your health care benefits generates some goodwill from the employee group that's on the other side of the negotiation?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's vitally important.
And how would that goodwill impact the day-to-day work or the attitude towards work of the employees?
Well, I think a disgruntled employee is going to produce less. You're going to have more problems disciplinarily, and it also encourages other people to come and join our team and be a part of Anne Arundel County government.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the one hand, I struggle with this a little bit because there is so much unknown surrounding sort of what happens in future years with this. But if I think what I'm hearing from you and from the administration can correct me if I'm wrong when you come back up after, but is that essentially with this, not much changes from the current practice, because as a practical matter, the prohibition against the bargaining has not been in place these past number of years. So do you envision that moving forward, it would work much like it has been these past few years?
Actually, I beg to differ a bit.
Okay.
I would say the machinery that we are proposing to put in place makes the exchange of information more robust. And one would expect the degree of conversation and knowledge and the exchange of information to be better. And therefore, in being self-critical and determining what the product is, what the price is, how we get to the price, and whether things like margin are put in and whether the margin's too much, and all the kinds of things that the actuaries like to talk about, I've seen in other jurisdictions work to reduce and suppress prices. Things like, for example, the introduction of participant audits to determine whether people are signed up or signed up their beneficiaries really should be covered in the plan based on definition. Different kinds of things like that, and different kinds of machinery I've been involved in proposing or working out to put in place, and they have saved money.
Okay, and I believe we were told this limits the cycle, right? You can only negotiate every Is it 2 years under this one?
Well, what happens as a matter of practice is the cycle is usually 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
Okay, because you don't go out every year and go on the market every year and redefine or recast what your program's going to be. And that takes a process of preparing, discussing the elements of a request for proposal, going out in the market, getting a request for proposal, then interviewing the persons who and organizations that present the proposal and working it through. So that takes time in itself, and it's not effective to do it on anything less than a 3 or 4 year basis because of the time and effort that's taken.
Okay, thank you.
Pleasure.
Yeah, let's continue with the public testimony. Mr. Woldruff.
Hi, Bill Woldruff, 876 Claffey Avenue. This is government at its best. What I mean by that when I say that is that you have the coalition and the county have come together and they have worked out an agreement. Yes, we can take our chances and both sides could lose heavily in court. Do we really want to do that? I say no. I suggest that, or I humbly ask that we vote in favor of this particular bill because, again, we worked on this together. I sat in, for all the meetings when we discussed Bill, 8513, and yes, that was a Jamie Benoit bill because the county executive's bill was worse. And, like I said, we fought in court for years, and we've come to a resolution, an amicable resolution, through the hard work of Joel and Obie, as well as the county office of law. And it's honest give and take on both sides. It's not all one-sided. It was a collaborative effort on all parties. So again, I humbly ask you, vote yes. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to continue on. Is there anyone that did not sign up would like to speak on Bill number 2419 as amended? Okay, seeing no movement in the crowd, the public hearing on Bill number 2419 as amended is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 2419.
Bill number 2419, an ordinance concerning personnel and purchasing employee and retiree health benefits program.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Councilwoman Hare?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Barron, I'm just going to ask, I threw out this question before, but is it the administration's position that sort of the practice as it has been for the past few years is really what's going to continue under this settlement agreement?
I think I defer a little bit to some of the caveats that Mr. Smith raised, and I'll also defer to our experts. But generally, in broad strokes, that folks that police our streets, fight our fires, do the work of county government will have a seat at the table, then yes.
Okay. I don't know if Office of Law wants to chime in, but I just want to understand if sort of the way it's been done the past few years since that provision of 8513 has not been enforced under the settlement agreement is sort of exactly how it's going to move forward.
I don't think there'll be a great deal of change. I mean, as Mr. Smith mentioned, there'll be some additional exchange of information, and there will be some perhaps additional participation prior to the RFP going out in the 18-month period of negotiation. There was always some exchange of information and in the past, and there was always input from the unions before the RFP went out. The bill simply formalizes that and sets some more parameters, so it's a little clearer to everyone involved kind of what the requirements are for that exchange of information, and as well as the negotiations leading up to the RFP.
So it's formalizing a practice that's already in place, more or less, if I'm understanding correctly.
It's a practice that was in place, but it wasn't formalized, correct.
Okay,
yes.
All right. And just to be sure, so this does, the groups are all negotiating together under this, correct? So it's one sort of outcome?
That is correct.
Okay, and it's every certain number of years?
Well, it's every time it's whenever the requests for proposals go out, that period prior to that.
That 18 months. Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further discussion. Just a last minute comment. I reiterated this at the last meeting. the fact that we have all the unions coming to the table here, the law office, no offense to the attorneys, you guys need to not make any more money. We need to solve this. We need to move forward. I mean, I'm tired of it, to be quite honest with you, and I think that we need to have a new day in Anne Arundel County where we tell our police, fire, and county employees that we want to have a seat at the table. I mean, that's what this bill is about. I understand that people are worried about cost. Let me tell you the cost of inaction if we don't do this. First of all, you can continue to pay the lawyers. And second of all, when you renegotiate healthcare, which I've been a part of committees, and you have 12 different bargaining units going for different things, you want to see the cost? We'll show it to you. You don't need an actuarial, you don't need an accountant to tell you that. So I think that we need to move forward. We need to work in good faith with our police, firefighters, and county employees and tell them that we care about them and we're willing to bring to the table. That's just my opinion. But, all right, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 2419 as amended.
Ms. Lacey?
As a point of privilege, I'd just like to say that I think this is an excellent compromise that I appreciate very much and commend the work that everyone has done to reach this compromise, and that I'm not as concerned in this instance about whether or not the County Council would approve the determination of annual cost of providing benefits. I think given the process that we have been through and the information that's made available to the County Council, there will be opportunities to ask questions and time if there is some issue for it to be reconsidered. But the fact is, we're not going to be denying our county employees and our police and fire health care benefits. So I vote aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Volke?
Point of personal privilege, Mr. Chair. I just want to know for the record, I don't do personal injury work, so that's not me. I do something else. But anyway, I understand the comment. I just wanted to clarify that when there was that sounded like ambulance chaser type remark. With that said, I would like to take a moment and just commend Mr. Smith and his advocacy in this case, the County Office of Law and their advocacy for the county. I've asked a lot of what I think are probing questions about this because I think they're questions that need to be asked. And I think to a large degree, I still have some question marks in my mind, but I also feel like this. What I'm hearing from both the industry groups and from the county is that this is a potential cost-saving measure, that this is going to increase employee morale as we have happier employees who have health insurance that they can be proud of and that they feel like they are a part of that negotiation. And furthermore, I second what Mr. Waldron said about the collaborative process because I agree this is government at its best, and it is important when you bring the industry groups together with the Office of Law, personnel, the administration, to be able to craft something that everyone can live with. The judge that I used to work for, he had a saying when he would adjudicate a case, and he would generally say, if no one is happy with my decision, that means that I made a good decision. And I think that in a lot of ways, this is similar but different. It sounds like everyone's relatively happy with this, but it also sounds like no one got everything that they wanted. And so with that, I am putting my faith behind this bill. I am looking to the county and to the unions as they negotiate in the future and just asking that everyone keep an eye on the bottom line. But with that, I will happily join in and vote yes on this bill.
Ms. Fiedler?
If I may take a moment, I just want to thank the administration and the Office of Law for answering all of my questions, some I asked multiple times. As I said in our work session, this was a beast of a bill, but not one that I felt we should be rolling the dice on, so I am an aye.
Ms. Radvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
I'll also take a quick minute. I, too, have asked a lot of questions. I really appreciate it. I think it's really important for me to note that it seems like it's a big benefit that we are doing this on a several-year track with a period of 18 months of negotiation, and that all of the unions have come to the table to do this together. I think that's a really important consideration from the county's perspective. To Chairman Pruski's point, trying to negotiate 12 different contracts with 12 different people, I imagine, is incredibly time-consuming, expensive, inefficient, all sorts of things. So I think that that's a really big piece of this. The more that we can streamline anything in county government, I generally think that that's a good thing. to County Councilwoman Lacey's point, I was certainly not trying to suggest that the County Council would never provide health care or anything like that for police, fire, teachers, et cetera, simply trying to understand the bill. So I appreciate your answering my questions on kind of what happens if the County Council does X, Y, or Z. But with all of this, I really appreciate your hard work and your willingness to answer all of my questions, and I'm an aye.
Mr. Pruski.
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 2419 is adopted.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 2519.
Bill number 2519, an ordinance concerning current expense budget, transfer of appropriation, Chief Administrative Office, Department of Public Works, Office of Transportation.
Okay, Mr. Barron and the crew, it looks like there's several folks coming up here. Wait till they get settled, and then you may begin.
Thank you, Pete. Well, thank you, Pete Barron with the county executive. With me from Office of Budget is Mr. Thoreau, from DPW, Ms. Henry, and I'm going to butcher your last name, Mr. Beckier. And Ms. Kelly Kenny from Office of Law. 2519 provides a transfer between county governments in the general fund. This is a transfer from the CAO contingency fund. Every year, we need to, generally, it snows, and we need to move some money for snow. So you'll see in the auditor's blue note where the money got broken down for the DPW transfer, which I believe amounts to a total of about $3.2 million for snow removal expenses. The second transfer is from the CAO contingency fund to the Office of Transportation in the amount of $397,400 for a contract extension, insurance, and grant matching. The original Office of Transportation contract for First Transit that provides fixed route and paratransit services for the elderly and disabled expired in December of 2019. So in order to avoid interruptions in service, the county processed an extension of this contract to operate this current service for the remainder of the period of January 1st, 2019 through December 31st, 2019. This and the folks from Office of Budget will probably give you a little bit more detail on the specifics of why, but this amount is to cover a gap in the period, about $204,000. The Office of Transportation also received some grant funding from the state of Maryland, and we need to pay for a match for a purchase of 4 vehicles. Third quarter transfer request is $78,400 for that. In addition, Anne Arundel County has seen an overall increase in premiums to industry prices, so there's an additional amount for insurance premium increases. The auditors, as stated in the auditor's blue letter, $78,400 will be moved from grants, contributions, and other contractual services related to the transportation contract. That was a lot, but for the most part, the big chunk of this money is for the snow removal and then getting the elderly and disabled around and continuing that contract. So folks at the table can answer any additional questions. With that, we ask that you move favorably on the bill.
Councilwoman Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Quick question. If this contract was extended from December of 18 through December of 19, is the money that we're seeing here only through the end of this fiscal year's budget, or does it extend all the way through next fiscal year's budget?
Stephen Through from the Budget Office. So this just covers FY19 costs.
Okay, perfect.
And as the auditor stated in her blue letter, they're actually going to exceed what we've actually have in this bill for contractual services. So you'll see us in the fourth quarter transfer bill as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no more initial questions, let's open the public hearing on bill number 2519. Seeing no movement in the audience, we will close the public hearing on Bill number 2519. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 2519.
Bill number 2519, an ordinance concerning current expense budget, transfer of appropriation, Chief Administrative Office, Department of Public Works, Office of Transportation.
Okay, thank you, Madam Secretary. Seeing no other lights, could you please read the roll on Bill number 2519?
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 2519 is passed.
Okay, Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 2619.
Bill number 2619, an ordinance concerning approval of lease agreement for Andover Equestrian Center.
Okay, Mr. Barron, I see there's some folks coming up. Whenever they get settled.
Evening again. Pete Barron with the county executive. With me at the table is Ms. Harris, Ms. Romans from Central Services, Mr. Anthony from Rec and Parks, and Ms. Kenny from Office of Law. This bill and the next bill on the agenda, 2719, are related to county-owned property that are being used for equestrian centers. Both are run by Morningside Stables. The current bill, 2619, Morningside Stables has leased the Andover Equestrian Center for the past 35 months. The lease expired February 28th, 2019. The lease is currently in holdover status. Now that the lease has expired, Morningside Stables has requested to lease the equestrian center, the Andover Equestrian Center, for 30 years. This lease shall commence June 1st, 2019 and expire May 31st, 2049. The rent will be $6,000 per year and then increase 4% every year. The Department of Rec and Parks is in favor of this bill. If the council approves, we'll move forward in executing the lease. I just want to sort of touch base a little bit, and we have folks here from Morningside Stables who can come and speak to more of the good work they do. This is open to the public for all sorts of different uses. There's one, and I'm sorry, I asked before and I keep getting them confused in my head. I believe this one, 2619, is in Councilwoman Lacey's district, and the next bill is in Councilwoman Fiedler's district. They are preserving the space. They're using them as an equestrian center. They're open for all sorts of things, including some therapeutic riding. There's folks, they mentioned that they have partnerships with the Baltimore Washington Children's Hospital. They can bring kids by and they can experience the horses. This is a great asset in the county, and it's a good use of the space. I want to talk a little bit also, the folks at Morningside have put in a lot of money to improve the properties in addition to the stuff that Parks and Rec has done to improve the property, and they'd be happy to talk a little bit more about what they have done. They're looking to make investments in these properties. The previous, this was always has been used as an equestrian center. Well, not always, but Mr. Anthony can tell you the history. It's been used for a long time as an equestrian center. The previous relationship with the previous tenant wasn't working. The place was not in as good condition. We do have tenants now that are committed to improving it and making the investments so that this thrives as a recreational opportunity for the citizens of the county. With that, we ask that you move favorable, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Volkey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I guess maybe this is a question for you, Mr. Anthony, because I'm assuming you're sort of the man with the answers. I see in the blue letter that the auditor put together that for both 26-19, and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but they are literally the same issue. So for 27-19 too, it looks like the county has expended county funds to maintain these properties in addition to what it sounds like Morningside itself has put out.
Yes.
Do you anticipate that the county will continue to be putting money in here? Do you anticipate that it'll become more Morningside, less the county? How do you see that relationship working?
Yes, good question. For the record, Rick Anthony, Director of Recreation and Parks. If I can just first tag along what Peter mentioned, this was probably our top 3 problem in the department when we got there. Not just the disrepair of the facilities, but also the tenants. We were getting complaints for the care of the horses, and quite frankly, I believe the previous administration thought about selling the property. So at that time, to be able to have Morningside step in and completely turn the place around, and we recognized that there was quite a bit of work that needed to be done from both parties. So these last 2 or 3 years, we did spend some money to get the facilities where they should have been. We do anticipate with this long-term lease that there will be more of a commitment from Morningside to do more significant investments. We think that we've gotten into a place now that we're doing more routine maintenance, not abatement, and I do believe this is a good bill. I believe her husband is on his last tour for the U.S. Air Force, and they want to stay in this area, and this is a significant step for them to make that long-term commitment here in Anne Arundel County.
Okay, great. And one more question for you, and this may be for Ms. Romans too, I don't know, but what would be the fair market rent on this? How much does this equate to a fair market versus the rate that we're doing?
For the record, Christine Roman, Central Services Officer. I would have a hard time answering that because you base fair market value on other comparables,
Sure.
And obviously
it's hard to find
other comparable equestrian facilities that are similarly situated to this one and to the one down in Broadneck. So I don't think we can answer that with any.
Do you know what we've received historically in terms of rental income on these properties?
Not on these specific properties. Did you have that, Samantha? No.
Samantha Harris, Real Estate Manager for the record. We have that information in the office, and I can provide that to you. However, when we came up with the numbers, it was very consistent with what we've used in the past.
Okay, so this is about what you're getting. This is not some major cut down from the rate to do this.
No, and actually, the $6,000 that they will be paying for the next year is consistent with what they've paid the past 3 years, and will be increased by 4% each year after.
That answered my question. Thank you all.
Okay, seeing no further immediate questions, let's open this up for public hearing 2619. Remarks are going to be limited to 2 minutes. We do have the following people, if you come forward, that are signed up. As you come forward, state your name and address, and again, you have 2 minutes. Ms. Hope Weber, Ms. Kimberly Zuloff. And Ms. Weber, whenever you're ready, just name, address in 2 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Hope Weber, and I live at 7125 Carmay Road in Sykesville, Maryland. However, I was a Glen Burnie resident for many, many years. I am here to support Morningside, operated by Stephanie and Derek Brigham, at the Andover Equestrian Center. I am also a leader of the Linthicum 4-H High Riders. Kim beside me is also one who used to be one of my 4-Hers and has grown up in the educational program through 4-H and has operated out of Andover Equestrian Center for many years. Matter of fact, we just celebrated our 45th, not only through me, anniversary of the High Riders. So we've been around in Linthicum for a long time. I want to tell you guys that you have found the right people with Stephanie and Derek. They have a love of the property, they care for it, and it has improved over the past 3 years. It was horrible working with past operators there. It is nothing but a delight to work with them now. You have found the right people to take care of Andover Equestrian Center, and Andover Equestrian Center needs them for the long term. So we support Bill 2619 for the long term. Also, I didn't hear anybody say anything about that the bike trail went through that park as well. So remember that when you're thinking in terms of the Equestrian Center. People go by there all the time on their bikes, stop and look at the horses, talk about the horses, come to our horse shows, and they love that park. So the county is very fortunate to have Andover Equestrian Center. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Zuloff?
Hi, Kimberly Zuloff, 15 Holly Road in Pasadena. As Ms. Hope was saying, I am a 4-H'er. I started in 2007, so I've been there around 12 years. So I aged out at age 18. I'm now 24, so this is my going on 3rd year being a leader of the High Riders. So when I started being a leader, I didn't only just get more responsibility working with the kids and building lesson plans on that aspect, but I also took a more leadership role in deciding what we do as a club for our yearly activities and planning our horse shows and doing registration paperwork and things like that. Meaning I didn't only work with the kids, but I started to work more with the parents and the adults. And with that came Stephanie and Derek and people at Morningside. So it's really great to have them be so nice and so supportive, bringing me into more of an adult role. It would be more difficult dealing with more difficult tenants as I'm moving up. I'm really excited that they're there, and we have a great relationship with them. It would be great to have them there long term as I continue to help grow our 4-H club and take it over at a later date. So working with them would be great, and they've been fantastic, and I have nothing bad to say about them at all. So thank you.
Thank you both. Is there anyone else who did not sign up but would wish to speak on 2619? Okay. As you come forward, Madam Secretary, we'll give you a sheet of paper to fill out, but your name, address, and 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, my name is Stephanie Brigham, and I'm president of Morningside Stables. My family and I operate Andover and Andy Smith Equestrian Centers. We offer riding lessons, summer camps, Girl Scout events, therapeutic riding, and birthday parties. We also host the Lithicum High Riders 4-H shows at the Andover location. We also have other special events such as school events, internships, and we started an annual open house festival open to the public as well. We travel to local horse shows to give more opportunities for students to compete as a team where we all can come together. Morningside Stables is a community-based barn whose mission is to educate its members of the joys of horseback riding in a safe and fun environment. We have really enjoyed being at these equestrian centers, and we look forward to the future there and plan to continue and to grow over the years. I'm happy to answer any other questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hello, Derek Brigham, 580 Broadneck Road, Annapolis, Maryland. I'm Stephanie's husband. I'm the Air Force guy. And as Mr. Anthony had mentioned earlier, when I got stationed out here, we moved here to Anne Arundel County, and we just fell in love with this place. And we were very fortunate to come across Andover, and then it's a long story. I won't bore you with it, but here we are today. And we have plans here, and we want to stay here. We have 3 kids. It's a beautiful community, and these properties that we've been very fortunate to be able to operate under are incredible. And as my wife says every day, I think the interaction she has with the kids and the memories that she's making for these kids are just, it's worth it. And I just wanted to, she's very nervous, but
don't do this much.
yeah, sorry. But I just wanted to thank everyone for their time, and it was very nice meeting you all.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Johnson?
Julie Johnson, P.O. Box 6634, Annapolis, Maryland. I am embarrassed that I did not do adequate homework on this. I do support equestrian centers, and it sounds like this particular, couple and Morningside Farms are doing a good job. I am concerned about a 30-year lease and what provisions are there to make sure that it continues as being open to everybody in the public. I'm also, and I'm really happy to hear that you're addressing the needs of the handicapped. And I will say that I had a student, well, I won't tell you how many years ago, but his name is David Africa, and he and his wife have been involved in the equestrian community in Anne Arundel County. And it is really, really important. We just have too many people who have no attachment to the land. They don't understand how dependent we are on other creatures, and how this all, well, it goes back to the Web of Life, which was a big book back in the 60s. But anyway, but I raised the question about what's the appropriate funding or rent and costs, and I would also raise the question about the minority communities, and I'll give you a little history. When the Smiths turned the property over to the county, they did so with the commitment that this was supposed to all be equestrian, and then magically, to the indignation of a significant fraction of people who wanted it to remain equestrian, they made ball fields. Now, ball fields are wonderful. I don't have any objection to them, but don't take the equestrian property and turn it over. So there's a concern there, and there was quite an outrage. But that's before your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Thank you all. Mr. Volke, I'm sorry, you had a question?
Just one quick question for, is it the Binghams? Is that the last name? Brigham. Oh. Do you all anticipate that you will be able to complete the 30-year lease? You look pretty young to me. Don't say your ages, but...
Right. Yes,
yes, sir.
definitely,
Yes,
for
with the
sure.
intention.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Ms. Hewitt?
And just to clarify, although it's a 30-year lease, each of the leases provides that either party can terminate the lease upon 120 days' notice. So
yes, ma'am, we
if something's
understand
going wrong, you can get out of it, or the county can get out of it.
Yes, ma'am, we understand
Yes.
that.
Thank you. Thank you. This panel? Any other folks who'd like to come up and testify in 2619? Seeing no movement, the public hearing on Bill 2619 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 2619.
Bill number 2619, an ordinance concerning approval of lease agreement for Andover Equestrian Center.
Okay, any further discussion? Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill number 2619.
Ms. Lacy?
Well, I'd like to invite the Brighams to move to Linthicum. I'm positive that my constituents there are very pleased with what you're doing and appreciate your effort and investment in the community. I'm quite happy to vote aye on this. Thank you.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Volke?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
I'd like to encourage the Brighams to stay in my district. Mr. Anthony said two words that I love, land preservation, so I'm an aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
I've not been a lifelong horse rider, but one of my earliest memories was going on a trail ride with my parents. I love horses, so I can't wait to find an excuse to go there. Aye, even though I'm in District 6.
Sorry, I didn't hear your vote.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 2619 is passed.
Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 2719.
Bill number 2719, an ordinance concerning approval of lease agreement for Andy Smith Equestrian Center.
Mr. Barron?
Good evening again. Good evening again. Pete Barron for the administration. Joining me at the table is Ms. Romans, Ms. Harris, Mr. Anthony, and Ms. Kenny. This bill is the companion bill to the bill we just heard, so I'm not going to repeat everything that we just heard. I know we've got a few more things on the agenda tonight. I do want to just reiterate the good work that they're doing, and one thing I had in my notes that I didn't mention, and everybody should do it, you should all go to their website, morningsidestables.horse. I still want to know how they got .horse. So, with that, we're happy to answer any questions specific to the Andy Smith Equestrian Center.
Okay, any initial questions? We will now open the public hearing remarks. It'll be limited to 2 minutes on Bill 2719. Seeing no movement in the audience, the public hearing on Bill number 2719 is now closed. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 2719.
Bill number 2719, an ordinance concerning approval of lease agreement for Andy Smith Equestrian Center.
Any further discussion? Okay, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on Bill 2719.
Ms. Lacy?
Aye.
Ms. Pickard?
Aye.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Aye.
7 in the affirmative, none in the negative. Bill number 2719 is passed.
Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill number 2819.
Bill number 2819, an ordinance concerning special community benefit districts, procedure for establishment.
I see that Councilman Volkey and Councilwoman Hare are sponsors. Not sure who. Councilman Volkey.
Sure, happy to speak to it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly with respect to this bill. So this comes out of the latest special community benefit district discussion that we had, particularly there was an SCBD proposed in my district. There were a lot of issues that came up as a result of that. We spent a lot of time with it. We had a number of questions that had to be answered with that. And one of the biggest concerns that I had out of all of it, and I hope it's shared by some of my colleagues, is the extremely low threshold for a community to be able to institute an additional taxing mechanism on the whole. And this actually is at odds, the SCBD provision, with some other provisions that we do for erosion control districts and for shoreline. And so those are 75% thresholds, as I understand it. Currently, this is really just a majority vote. That's bothersome to me. I think that for the awesome power of taxation and the ability for people to come in and say to other people, you need to pay more money as a result of you being in this area, there just needs to be a higher threshold. And interestingly, I would note that in the auditor's blue letter that the last 3 SCBDs that have been brought before the council were approved with the last 3, 77.8, 75.5, 65.8. The one before that was 52%, and that one would be concerning to me, but the others are basically there. So it just makes sense to me to increase the threshold and say, if you're going to do this, this needs to be this level. This does not affect modifications. Modification of an existing SCBD would remain at the 50% threshold, and dissolution of an SCBD would also remain at the 50% threshold. So if you need to make changes as a community after you've already instituted the SCBD, the mechanism is there. You only need a bare majority to do that. But to impose this new greater tax on the community, the concern I have is if you imagine a community of 20, 30 houses and you get 10 or 15 of your neighbors together and they say, we want to do this, and the other half of the community is completely opposed, you really have a pretty low threshold to be able to do this. So for me, that was my concern procedurally. That's what it came out of, was this discussion on the first SCBD that we had in front of us, and I would ask my colleagues to support it. Thank you.
Councilwoman Hare?
Yeah, I actually, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a lot to add to that. It certainly, the last SCBD that we were voting on, there was certainly some strong opposition to it, and there were a number of people who really had never responded to the petition and whatnot, and it struck me, in my mind, I was thinking about 100 homes, and that if 51 people wanted the SCBD, 49 might be against it, and it could still pass. And that struck me as really sort of an unfair burden to put on other people, particularly if the tax was going to be significant. So, you know, this is a number that we use in other areas of law and legislation, and it does bring it closer to parity with some of the shore erosion control and things like that. And I think we need to make sure that the community has a larger voice in establishing these to begin with. So for those reasons, I'd like to ask everyone to support it also.
Administration.
Sure. Evening, Pete Barron. Joining me at the table is Ms. Adebo from Budget and Ms. Kenny from Office of Law. I also watched the the first SCBD we saw. This is a difficult issue. The administration is going to respectfully oppose the bill, although this was a difficult one. I think it's a matter of a policy for the council to set the level is where we should look, and it's a tough question. And frankly, is 66% right? Is 55% right? Majority rules in this country is usually what we've gone with. So you do need a majority. And just to be clear, unlike in a election for public office, it's not 50% of the people who showed up that day. It is 50% of the 50% plus one of the property owners. If the council does make the choice that the policy should be higher, it will make these a little bit more difficult to come through, but probably not impossible. Just want to be clear, though, SCBDs do a lot of good stuff for communities, and Ms. Adebo can definitely talk a lot more about that. We have a number of them in the county. They do all sorts of things from maintenance, repairs, public safety, security, pest control, purchase of recreational equipment, and building reserve funds for future projects. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions, but we respectfully oppose the bill.
Councilwoman Lacey, and then we'll work our way back.
Madam Auditor or Ms. Adebo, of those last 4 SCBDs, could you identify what each of those 4 were and the total number of properties in each SCBD?
I don't have that directly in front of me because sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. Tommy Adebo, Budget Office. I do not have it, the number of homes in each district in front of me, but the last 4 that were formed were Millburn, Shides Cove, Kensington, and...
Starts with an A.
Amberley? No. I forget. That's the last 3.
Just so you're aware, the silence is the Madam Auditor looking up the information. We're not. There's no interruption or anything.
Okay, I have it now.
Venice. I'm sorry, it was Venice. Did you say Venice?
No, I did not. Venice was an SECD, not an SCBD.
Yeah, you're right.
So
Broadwater
Creek.
Broadwater Creek.
All right. Thank you. I think perhaps you all know, hopefully someone knows, if you were to rate the contentiousness of the establishment of an SCBD, how would you rate those latter 3 compared to what we went through in establishing the Millburn SCBD?
Millburn was an extreme.
Okay, that's what I thought. So is another way of looking at these numbers of 65.8% and 75.5% and 77.8% of property owners agreeing to establish the SCBDs would be that those people all agree it's a great idea, and that's the more normal experience that we have in the county?
Yes, it's, sometimes we complain about the SCBD process, but generally my experience with the communities are positive.
And is it fair to say on the whole, the county saves money, even though there's a significant amount of time spent by the Office of Law, the Office of Budget, the Office of Finance, and the Office of the County Auditor to administer the SCBDs?
No.
No net savings to the county?
I'm not seeing where, I feel that the administrative fee covers the cost, but I don't think we're saving money in terms of establishing SCBDs personally.
Well, if I could clarify, I'm asking about if, say, for SCBDs such as Millburn that want to, rebuild their piers, and things like that that don't belong to the county, I think, is my understanding, but not that there are any peers in my district, but that I know of. But anyway, point being, it would, to get those repaired would otherwise, the idea is that it would otherwise require an allocation of the county council to be able to repair or renovate things that would be otherwise public structures, but they're not within the SCBD.
No, we do not own the property to have any, to have to fix it. We don't own it.
Often these SCBDs are formed because there are homeowners associations already operating, and they're collecting homeowners association dues, and then they use those dues, and this is a mechanism to collect it if people don't pay. But there's always kind of a, there's always people, I guess I would say there's always people who contest an SCBD establishment, and there's always a group that want to have the SCBD establishment.
Well, that's just the same as we have with any kind of
Right,
policy debate,
exactly.
including taxes, and people are allergic to taxes and others are in love with taxes or whatever, right? I think even though, whether or not we as a county own the property, I guess maybe another way of framing it then is, are we saving money in the sense that property values should hopefully be, propped up or not decline because the infrastructure within the community, whether or not we own it, is now being maintained by those property owners through a mechanism that allows for certainty about the fees that'll be collected so that they can then invest that money in their communities for the good of the community.
Yes, it is a benefit to the community as a whole, and I would say that the county derives a benefit as well.
And so if the HOAs, let's just say, they were able to deed over to the county their pier so that they didn't have to use an SCBD to maintain it, then the county, in accepting that deed, would be undertaking also that we would have to maintain it.
That would be a question for Christine Romans. I don't know what the process or policy is.
Okay. I'm willing to assume that's true. But if you happen to find differently.
If I can take a stab at, I think what you're driving at, Councilwoman, is a number of the things that SCBDs do, that community may come to the county to do that service. Or that thing, whether it's road maintenance or pest control might be a good example, might come to the county and ask us to do it when otherwise the community is paying for it itself. So while I don't think we can quantify, the administrative fee covers the cost to the county, there, I assume, is some net benefit to the community as a whole.
Well, it certainly seems reasonable to me, but, and thank you for that. I do want to ask, Mr. Volke, would you, I guess, explain why not apply the same percentages as you propose in this bill for creating an SCBD to terminating an SCBD? Why should it be easier to terminate than it is to establish?
I'm going to make 2 points. One, I'm not sure that it's typical decorum on the council for all of us to ask each other questions in a public meeting. But with that said, I will answer that. Generally, in my opinion, the power to create taxation, I think, should be a higher burden. And this is a philosophical statement from me, as opposed to the power to get rid of a taxing authority. So to me, I don't have any problem leaving this at a majority threshold to say you can get rid of it. But to be able to create it, I think you need a larger percentage of people there. So I would just point that out there, that I think historically that is, and I would defer to Mr. Chair because he's been here before, but I think typically it is atypical for us to ask one another questions on the dais.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I certainly intend no disrespect, but as you're the sponsor of this bill, I think it's fully appropriate because we are up here to deliberate. But I will then say, if you had considered the issue, I was curious because if perhaps you had spoken with, members of SCBDs or perhaps other than the Milburn process, which 6 out of 7 of us, that's the only one we've seen, and it was apparently abnormally contentious. So I am not necessarily opposed to the idea of raising the threshold above a bare majority, but I'm not seeing why 2/3 is necessarily where it should be either, when on balance, it seems like we've already, this is well-trodden ground, and it seems to be working overall, except perhaps in that special case, which I recognize is in your district. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilwoman Pickard.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question about what kind of modifications come before with a majority. What is that? What is a modification to a current?
A modification is generally for the purposes what a SCBD is allowed to do. So, for example, an SCBD may not have acquisition in their purposes, so they may do a modification to include that action.
Oh, okay. So a modification would allow them to
expand the scope of what they're allowed to do with the SCBD funds.
And modifications only take a threshold of 50 plus 1?
Right now, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Volke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a brief statement to say that with respect to my discussions with folks who have dealt with these SCBDs, I did spend a good deal of time talking to Ms. Blair in the Office of Law, who has dealt with these extensively. I also spent time talking with Ms. Bray, additionally in the Office of Law, who also does SCBDs. So I would note that I did do my homework, and I did find that Milburn is not the one and only issue that has come up. There have been numerous communities where these things have happened. Not every time is it contentious, but there have been a history of these. And in fact, this bill came before the council, I believe it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that. So this is not a necessarily novel idea that I've come up with all on my own, so I can't take all the credit. But with that, I did want to ask Mr. Barron with the administration, what would the administration's position be on the appropriate threshold?
At this time, 50% plus 1. I mean, I would be happy to continue the conversation.
Okay.
But with respect, I mean,
55. You said maybe 60.
We didn't have a conversation about this bill before it was introduced, so I don't know, and I haven't had a conversation with the county executive about what the appropriate level he thinks. I mean, frankly. We'd be open to continuing the conversation, but at the moment, with the one that we have seen, for 6 of the council, it was new. It was also new for the administration. So we have seen there are a number of these in the county, and if you go to the code, what was the number, like 130 something?
There's like 80 something.
There's 100 districts in general, but SCBD specifically, we have about 80 active right now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So there are a number of them in the county, and they do a lot of good. Changing the rules of the road when there are already that many established is something that we should be careful about.
Okay. Well, and just so the record is clear, I want to thank Ms. Adebo, who was involved with me in reviewing this legislation. I'm not going to say she took a policy position on it because she didn't. I also want to note that Ms. Kentley Bray from the Office of Law also was involved and assisted with it. And I further want to say that Ms. Lays in the Budget Office also had an opportunity to review and comment on this. So it was not as though this was introduced without any input from any of the departments.
I didn't mean to imply, and as everybody on the council knows, this administration has taken a very different tack than previous administrations in making sure that our agency doors are open for factual discussions.
And I also just want to point out in the auditor's blue note that there is no fiscal impact to the county from this bill. So it's not a cost savings. It's also not a costlier process. It doesn't change the actual process. Thank you.
Okay, moving along, Councilwoman Rodvian.
This is a question, I guess, for Ms. Adebo. What are the limits on what an SCBD is able to do with the funds it collects?
The limits vary from district to district. They essentially set the boundaries for what they want to do with the funding. There are some limitations. I believe that would be a question for the law office.
I'm sorry, I turned you into the attorney at the table.
Kelly Kenny, Supervising County Attorney.
So sorry.
I apologize, I don't have the county code right in front of me. There are certain limits of things that an SCBD can be created for. Some of the types of things that Ms. Dabo talked about today, road improvements, different types of improvements in a neighborhood that are set forth in the county code, and they are governed by the parameters of the petition. So if they petition only to do certain things, those are the things that they can use the money for.
But there's not limitations with respect to sort of things that are necessity versus things that are more, I don't know. Well, I guess everyone draws a different line in terms of what's a necessity and what's sort of a luxury or a nice amenity, but not a necessity. There's no line drawn in that regard, right? So an SCBD could, provide nice amenities that wouldn't strictly be necessities.
Right, SCBDs could provide a pool or a pier or things like that, so those would be amenities.
Okay.
If I can chime in, this is not a legal opinion. I have Kimberly Bray texting me. Essentially, anything that the county can do, any purpose that the county can spend money on, the district can spend money on, if they put it in their purposes.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is more of me just sort of a little bit thinking out loud, but for me personally, I think ideally 100% of a community would want this, right? That's what you'd hopefully want, everybody to be on the same page. It's a well-taken point that in the past 4 years, 3 of them have been at this higher level. So the process as it is, in most cases, is working. Raising the threshold wouldn't affect seemingly those cases where the process is currently working because they're already meeting that threshold. Raising this threshold really serves only to help in those instances where it is really contentious, or there is maybe it's a very high fee and there's some disagreement on that, or maybe there's a disagreement on what the funds would be used for. It seems to help get more of the community on the same page in those rare instances where it is super contentious. At least that's the way I see this. And I don't see it changing for the vast majority of communities who want to be an SCBD because historically they appear to already be meeting this higher threshold. That's all. Thanks.
Councilwoman Lacey.
About the SCBDs, for communities that have HOAs, say like a new construction community in the county, have you found that any of those have applied for an SCBD? That you can recall? It's okay if you can't, but.
Yeah, I can't recall at the moment, but I know due to this bill, I am getting a lot of petitions in quickly, well, more than the norm.
Okay. Well, I suppose that answers my question. Thank you.
Before we go to public hearing, I just have a question, Mr. Barron, you may know. So there are 80 SCBDs. Obviously, I've been up here for 5 years and I've seen them come and go contentious. How many have been notified about this bill? Because I know a few people, who may have an interest with raising it, lowering it, it's always, but I just didn't know if there was outreach to the 80 that are out there, because they're the biggest constituency they're going to be impacted. And I'm just curious if they're also knowing with this bill, because here's why. If they go for a renewal or they ask for another one, that's in their realm. So I'm just curious in the outreach.
Maybe Office of Law or Budget could speak more. I mean, as far as I know, we haven't done any targeted outreach. The sponsor may have. Also, the council does advertise these bills. So, I mean, other than that, I don't believe we have done anything
It doesn't
special.
It doesn't apply to those that are already established, even if they need to do the modification.
So this is newer.
Yeah, it's the ones that I've been having conversation with over the last 2 years that are now racing to the finish line.
Gotcha. So the ones that are currently in the queue and trying to get it,
yes,
they're the ones who brought up concern. And how many are there that are concerned? I mean,
I believe I have 5 pending petitions.
Okay. All right. And then obviously the other question too is, and you may have gotten the feedback, if somebody doesn't show up, it's a no vote. Even though they wanted to support it, you'd have to be there for the petition and sign on. I mean, I guess the question was brought up, here's the threshold. It was to bring it in line with other rates that we have. But in larger jurisdictions who also run these programs, are we comparable? We adding a higher threshold, lower? Are we about the same? Do we know a comparability at all, or any idea?
I believe this is primarily more popular in Anne Arundel County
Okay.
in terms of SCBDs.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm sorry, Ms. Hewitt.
Yeah, the Section 2 of the bill says that the ordinance doesn't apply to petitions filed after the effective date of this ordinance. But my question is, if there's an SCBD set up for purposes of security and pest control and, you know, making sure that the private roads in the community are kept up to date, and then they decide they want to also have their SCBD apply to a clubhouse or the renovation of a pier, wouldn't a new petition process need to occur in order to change or modify the purposes of the SCBD?
Yes.
Yes, and then wouldn't that modification or change be governed by this new provision?
No, this is for establishing a new SCBD. That would be considered a modification, which I believe is a different subsection.
Thank you.
Thanks. Councilwoman Pickard?
So that was my concern with the way the bill currently reads. So you would need 2/3 to establish, so you could technically establish an SCBD with very limited scope, but then you would only need 50 plus 1 to modify that or just terminate it. So that just seems, something doesn't seem right with me. That's my concern with the way the bill is written in the hypothetical.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, let's actually hear from the public. We'll now open the public hearing on 2819. Remarks will be limited to 2 minutes. We do have folks who are signed up. As you come forward, please state your name and your address for the record. Ms. Judith Gibson and Ms. Amy Leahy are the 2 folks that I have signed up. Ms. Gibson, your name, address in 2 minutes whenever you're ready.
All right. I'm Judith Gibson. I live at 605 Drain Drive in Pasadena. I am a member of the Board of Governors of the Laurel Acres Community Association, and we are in the process of establishing an SCBD. And I'd like to explain why in a larger community such as ours with over 200 homes, getting that 2/3 may be impossible. We are dealing with a significant number of non-resident homeowners, okay? We have to find them and get their names on the signatures. That's another thing. It's a significantly older community. Many of the homes were built in the 1940s and 50s, and there are consequently 3, 4, 5 names on the deed. They all have to sign the petition, and they all have to be in agreement, unless one of them disagrees, in which case that's a no vote for all of them. So we do have more than 50%, but and it's taken us almost a year to get there. And it may very well take us another year if we need to get to that 2/3, because people dying, and we have to go back and get somebody else to sign the petition, people selling their homes. We had a builder who owned 7 or 8 homes in the community who is now in the process of selling them all. So, and these were all yeses that are converting to nos. So to make us reach that 2/3, and I would say less than 10% of the community is actively opposed to what we're doing. Most people are either ignoring us or we just can't find them. And thank you.
Ms. Gibson, just a follow-up quick question. Do you find, too, obviously you said seniors and other folks, but I'm never home. I'm probably here, but I'm just asking overall, are there people that you try and knock on their door and you're a volunteer? I was a president of a community association. Trying to get a volunteer today is difficult, so I'm just curious, is that another challenge, is trying to get somebody when they're
trying
home?
to get somebody, yes, but we invited people to our community association meetings. We had a picnic where we invited everybody to come. We have sent out mailings. We have everybody on the community association email list has gotten repeated emails, and all the information is posted on the community association website. So in spite of all that, we have a comfortable margin over the 50%, but getting to 2/3 would be a real challenge.
Okay. Councilman Volke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Gibson, thanks for being here. Quick question. Are you all already in the process of forming the SCBD?
We are in the process, so I don't think this is going to apply to us,
Right.
but there may be another community association in the same
predicament. Sure,
I mean,
understood.
again, if you have a small, contentious community, I can see making them get to 2/3.
Yeah.
You know, if I lived in a community of 12 people, I wouldn't want 7 of them to be able to vote me into higher taxes. But there are 200 homes in the community.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's more of a challenge.
I just wanted to check, though, for Laurel Acres, because I've been to your HOA meeting.
Yes.
I was just there the other month.
Right.
You all are already, I thought, actively in the process.
We are actively in the
working with
process.
budget to do it, so this wouldn't apply to you.
Right.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Leahy?
Hi, Amy Leahy. I live at 712 Monmouth Avenue in Severna Park, Maryland. I have 2 things that I will come at this from. One is that, as Councilman Volke mentioned, 5-6 years ago, I was working with County Executive Laura Newman, and there was a bill that was put forward trying to increase it to 75%. And the reason was because there were problems with some of the communities, and the fact that it was only 50.1 that would put a taxing authority on everyone else in the community for something that may not necessarily be what everyone wants. Some of the things some of the other things is I live in a community where over the past 20 years there have twice been an attempt to create a special community benefit district. The first time it was because the community had overextended itself with lawsuits, and they seemed to think that if they created an SCBD that they could pay for their legal fees, which was of course not a good reason to have an SCBD. I happen to be in an improvement association, so we do not have a homeowners association. We do, however, have a community beach. Part of the explanation that was given for creating an SCBD was to build sidewalks or to improve the sidewalks on the side of the road. We have public roads. That is not a job that the community should be doing. That is something that is the county's prerogative. Now, of course, we have sidewalks if you want to do something to improve them. I don't think that's anything that someone should have imposed on their tax bill, that if there's a tax lien, if you don't pay this, you could lose your home. So I have a real problem with the fact that it only takes 50.1%. The other thing is that in our community beach, even to have an SCBD created to pay some of that.
Please summarize, Ms.
some of the fees. There would still be a separate charge put on somebody who wanted to use the beach. So you would have to pay the taxes, but then not necessarily be able to use the beach after that. So these are real concerns that I have for anyone who has to pay a tax like that. It should be definitely 2/3. So.
Thank you. Yeah. Ms. Schuett?
May I ask a question of the administration when we're finished with the public testimony? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we might have more folks come up,
I'm
but
sorry.
I'll bring that
Yep.
at the time. Thank you all to this panel. Moving forward, is there anyone who did not sign up? I had the 2 ladies here that did sign up. Is there anyone else that'd like to come forward and speak on 2819? Ms. Brown? And again, if there's anyone else at this time, name and address in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Council. My name is Carol Brown, and I live at 563 Deep Creek View in Annapolis, 21409. I was president of the Deep Creek Village Homeowners Association, and I am not in favor of raising the voting to 2/3 for this reason, that I agree with one of the speakers before that it's very, very difficult to get 2/3 when you're looking for homeowners' votes. Now, 2/3 I think of more of super extraordinary relief, as in constitutional things like impeaching presidents and things like that. But just maintaining your property, I think majority rules. And the key to our homeowners association is, of course, notice. And we have several meetings. Everyone comes. We send brochures. We send notices to our homeowners. They are all welcome to come and put in their views and speak in favor or pro or con. But I think the comment that homeowners keeping their properties up to snuff helps our county. It helps all the way around. And I think that if you raise it to 2/3, you really almost have rule of the minority. to shut down improvements and maintenance in property. So I think the realistic thing is 2/3 sounds easy, but it's almost impossible. We found that getting a majority of our community involved in anything was hard in and of itself, but that was our target, and we were able to accomplish things for our community. Thank you very much. I oppose this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Is there anyone else? Okay, we are going to close the public hearing on Bill 2819. Madam Secretary, please read the title of Bill 2918. Yeah, I'm going to give you that.
Bill number 2819, an ordinance concerning special community benefit districts, procedure for establishment.
Ms. Schuett.
Yes, this may be a question for the law office, but the bill says that a district may not be established unless a petition is signed by the owners, blah, blah, blah. But the mere signing by the owners of the petition doesn't actually create the SCBD, as I think. In my view, the SCBD is not created until the county council adopts a law creating the SCBD. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, if that's accurate, then somebody who's in the process of getting their signatures and hasn't actually had their SCBD formed by approval of the county council would be subject to this bill.
Well, Section 2 doesn't say that it's been created. It says districts for which petitions for formation have not been submitted to the county prior to the effective date. So I think the trigger is the submission to the Office of Budget.
So if you got all your signatures and you have your petition in with the county, you're grandfathered?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Rodian.
I think this question really is for Ms. Adebo this time, but I'm trying to get a sense of the SCDBs that are formed for, I think you can probably tell I'm stuck on, you know, the sort of amenities, these extras, these things that are nice to have in your community but not necessary. Maybe not everyone would want to use them versus things that are basic maintenance. I think I would feel more comfortable with the 50% plus one if we were talking strictly about, you know, things that were maintenance, upkeep of the community. But I mean, in the Millburr example, we saw, you know, a swimming pool and a clubhouse and things like that, you know, I think go beyond, you know, basic necessities and maintenance. And so I'm just curious, of the SCBDs that are out there, is that a typical, do they typically go into the realm of amenities, or is it more common for an SCBD to strictly deal with maintenance, upkeep, taking care of roads, snow removal, you know, sort of the basics, I guess. And I don't know if anyone can help me distinguish between those two, like what's the line? I mean, obviously, if you live on the street at the end of the, you know, at the beginning of the pipe stem, you don't necessarily need the snow removed for your neighbors, although hopefully that's a nice thing to do. But, you know, so what's a necessity varies from person to person.
Most of the SCBDs are generally for maintenance and improvement of community properties. There are just a handful that probably have clubhouses and pools and things of that nature. But largely, their maintenance, their security, their grass, snow removal.
Okay, you just made my vote harder. Thank you.
Councilwoman Lacey.
Ms. Adebo, are you aware of any examples of SCBDs that have been established where you might say you have an older neighborhood that really has no public amenities to speak of? You know, maybe there's a bit of open land, but there's nothing that's been built on it. If within, say, you know, this group of homes, the 50 plus one number of homes signed up, and they said, well, the purpose is we want to build a pool for our community. We've been waiting a long time for the county to put, you know, rec and parks to build a pool here. We want to go ahead and build a pool ourselves. Could they do that through the SCBD?
Yes, if the purposes states that they're able to acquire, assuming they don't own the land, but as long as it's written into their purposes, acquisition, it's contingent on the purpose, but yes, they can.
So in that example, is it fair to say that's actually a way in which a community can take ownership over improving itself and its own, circumstances for the betterment of the community?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further questions, just to chime in, again, I understand the intent of both, the folks who are bringing this forward. It's just that the people who are not here is really what worry. And I understand there's public notice. This was brought up before. I just think, I have a concern over that there may be folks that, think about doing it and then aren't aware of the change. And then we come back and kind of say, well, why wasn't there greater discussion or concern? So I just want to get it on the record. Again, I understand the intention, but it's the folks who may not be aware of the change and know what's going on. So seeing no further discussion, Madam Secretary, please call the roll on bill number 2819.
Ms. Lacy?
I have, first, the objection to the bill that I think increasing the percentage that are required to create an SCBD and then not likewise setting the percentages for modification and termination of the SCBD creates an inherent unfairness and a possibility of minority rule over in the decisions of the SCBD. Just overall, as we're trying to contemplate theoretically what this could be. But the theory I like to contemplate is that as perhaps, since we have a lot of areas in the county that could use revitalization and could be empowered to have a tool that allows them to help invest in themselves, I wouldn't want to make that unnecessarily difficult on those communities. So I think the net benefit of even though I don't, as I said before, I don't fully disagree with perhaps raising it above 50.1, but I think maybe a different approach based on the number of houses to be included or something. More thought would need to go into it for me to think of it as fair, and since I don't want to vote for things I think of as unfair, I'm a nay.
Ms. Pickard?
No.
Mr. Volkey?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
Aye.
Ms. Rodvian?
Aye.
Ms. Hare?
Aye.
Mr. Pruski?
Nay.
4 in the affirmative, 3 in the negative. Bill number 2819 is passed.
Madam Secretary, please read the title of resolution number 1819.
Resolution number 1819, a resolution entitled Charter Amendment, Budgetary and Fiscal Procedures, Income Tax. Resolution proposing an amendment to the Charter of Anne Arundel County to place a limit on the local income tax rate in the county.
Okay, Mr. Volkey is the sponsor.
I'll defer comment until after the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Administration?
Good evening, Pete Barron for the county executive. We strongly urge the council to reject this resolution. Plain and simple, this resolution is fiscally irresponsible. Bond rating agencies could lower our AA plus and AAA bond ratings. I just want to read a quick quote from Standard & Poor's. If the county were to experience fiscal pressures stemming from unexpected expenditures, either capital or operations related, or reductions in revenue, stock market crash, economic downturn, or labor negotiations, and reserves are utilized to bridge imbalances affecting budgetary flexibility and performance, we could revise our outlook or lower our ratings. This resolution will jeopardize the fiscal health of the county. This council is the final fiscal authority. This is not just a talking point. You are going through the budget process right now, and you are going through the budget line by line. You are enabled, authorized to strike, remove, cut, and make changes to ensure that we pass a balanced budget. If you believe that the tax rate should be at a certain rate, you are empowered to do so. We've seen from a number of previous council members and people connected to former administrations, this isn't just, the folks who support the current county executive, you see folks from many different administrations talking, and many different councils talking about the responsible choices that are being made in this budget to address the big needs in our county. Former Councilman Benoit said when he served on the council from 2006 and 2014, he too participated in the charade that revenues were adequate to support world-class schools, recreation, public safety, and infrastructure that we have in Anne Arundel County. A former senior member of the administrations of county executives, Robert Neal and John Gary, Miss Arideth Cade, and I hope I said her first name right, who said her late husband, Jack Cade, who was a member of the Charter Commission and on the First County Council, served 22 years as a Republican state senator from District 33. Long as the minority leader, he was known for his fiscal conservatism, but he would never support a proposal to restrict the ability of the county government to make decisions about how to fund the services and that the community might need. This council received a letter from Mr. Charlie Mannion. Anne Arundel will still, under this current budget, retain our position, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't read my handwriting, will still retain its position in the bottom tier of the county's tax burden. So we rank, I believe it is 7th lowest in the county for personal income tax and 5th lowest for property tax. We are in the bottom quarter even after the changes made in this budget. You saw the Baltimore Sun and the Capitol endorse this budget. The chairman talked about the ability for us to respond in a crisis or an emergency. We have a county executive who has been willing to make the tough decisions to fund our schools, to fund our police, to fund our firefighters. This resolution will only protect council members, politicians, future county executives from having to make the tough decisions. We heard from a young lady at the beginning of this hearing who talked about 40 kids in her classmates' classrooms. We are addressing those needs, and we need to take on these challenges. This potential charter amendment would restrict our ability to take those on. And furthermore, I think the unintended consequence, and the sponsor, Mr. Volke, I don't believe you intend this, but if the voters were to approve this, and assuming we pass the budget in some way, we will have to lower our rate. We will have to fire police officers, firefighters, the teachers that we are hiring now. And we will have to restrict county services. Our class sizes will go up. Our response times will continue to be stretched. And I think something that, I care about driving in every morning, will sit in traffic longer. So with that, we request that council reject this resolution.
All right, well, let's hear from the public. I know we have some folks who signed up. I will call 6 at a time. We have 6 chairs. The following people, please come forward, and you're going to state your name and address. Limit your remarks to 2 minutes. Again, when the bell, buzzard, whatever's working, goes off, I'd ask you to conclude your sentence. Please don't be disrespectful. We want to make sure everybody has a choice to get heard. So let's do the first 6 people. Alpha Stevens, Laura Day, John Jansen, Tim Grooms, Amy Leahy, and Brooke Standelmeyer. The first 6 folks. And we'll go in that order. So once Alpha's ready, your name and address and 2 minutes. Thank you.
I am Alpha Stevens. I live at 7923 Carriage Drive in Severn. I'm here as the president of the League of Women Voters of Anne Arundel County to speak on our opposition to resolution number 1819. The League believes flexibility in fiscal policy is necessary to allow for county needs to be met. We believe a tax cap would unduly handicap the county in making it the best place, and would unduly handicap efforts to provide services and programs that will make our citizens' lives better and enable the county to thrive for years to come. Our schools, teacher and support staff pay, public safety staffing, environmental hazards are just a few of the things that have suffered as a result of insufficient funding. In 2004, our league adopted a position on fiscal policy which supports a more equitable and efficient fiscal structure and opposes any constitutional amendment to limit taxes and spending. It further states support for a progressive income tax as the first choice if a revenue increase is necessary. As council members, you have been elected by us to govern and to act in the best interests of your constituents and the county, to keep this county a great place to live. Per our county charter, it is the job of county council to levy taxes when needed. Taxes should be determined by careful consideration, debate, and deliberation, and not by an arbitrary number. If the charter amendment were adopted, you would be limiting the authority granted to you by the charter. The League of Women Voters of Anne Arundel County does not support an amendment that would restrict the ability of this county council and future councils to respond to community needs and opportunities. We don't know what the future holds. Therefore, we respectfully oppose and we urge the council to defeat the resolution.
Thank you, Pam. Ms. Day.
I do not have a statement prepared, but I also am against this proposal. Honestly, the idea of, once again, I watched you very, very concerned about future and not being able to know, and the other people here not being able to know exactly what the needs are for the future. And I would like my government to be able to respond appropriately to future unknown needs, whether that to be raising or lowering taxes. But the idea of a progressive tax sounds like a very good idea in order to be able to limit the burden on fixed income and lower income constituents. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. John Jason.
Thank you. John Jason, Pasadena, Maryland. I'm a father of two. I'm a husband of one. And I can say that from what I read, the difference in the tax rates between Chairperson Zvolke's initiative and what's currently being proposed, it averages out to about $310 per person in Anne Arundel County. You know, that really is going to kind of suck if nobody minds the dramatic effect. What else is going to suck is if we don't get the road repairs that would pay for, because a front-end alignment, a new tire, new shocks is going to cost a lot more than that. I can also tell you something else that's going to suck is the extra asthma inhalers that I'm going to have to pick up for my family, because we're still driving cars and we're still stuck in traffic all through Anne Arundel County, breathing smog. You know, the emergency inhalers cost about $375. So yeah, thanks for that $310 tax savings there. Something else that'll suck, you know, as you know, Chairman, Chairperson Zvolke, I've asked you about transportation in Pasadena before. Okay, so we don't spend on transportation. We don't have public transportation. We don't have bike lanes. So I got to figure out a car and insurance and gas for my kid to go to college. I can guarantee that's going to be a lot more than $310 each year. Other things that suck is, can we actually take care of our beaches? Will we have health inspectors to make sure that they're safe to swim in? Will we get sick for trying? How much is that going to cost? How much will we spend being penny wise and pound foolish by restricting our ability to manage the county budget? So I am against the tax cap. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tim Grooms.
Tim Grooms, Pasadena, Maryland, 411 Willow Bend Drive. I'm sorry, I'm from Glen Burnie. I don't know why I said Pasadena. Anyway, so we're adding possibly $106 million in additional spending this year, and as expected, this will require a tax increase. I'm with Councilman Zvolke on putting a 2.5% income tax to referendum. It is time for the local government to stay within its means and learn how to cut things out of budgets that are not possible to put in at the time. Because you guys can raise taxes, and there's always other ways to raise taxes, but in the end for government, I don't care if it's local, state, or federal, it's never enough money. People always want more and more, and the only way to do it, we have to raise taxes. Nobody ever wants to say no to things. So I ask you to vote in favor of favor of this tax cap going to referendum. In fact, really, there's no reason you shouldn't vote for this. Mr. Pruski, you said in a recent comment I saw in the Capitol that you think this is bad policy. You said, I don't think it is prudent or fiscally responsible. If you don't like the rate, vote against it. So let us have the ability to vote against the tax increase in the 2020 election and put it on referendum. I mean, the only reason you would not vote in favor of this is you think county residents are not in favor of the increase and they will vote against it and it will make you look bad. Also, I do hope to see this go on a referendum because I would love to see all the fear-mongering statements that come out if we have to cap our taxes at 2.5%, because we'll have to fire everybody. There'll be all kinds of excuses for having to do it. But as you know, there'll all be other ways to find out how to raise taxes, or we can be like Baltimore County or whatever, where they're trying to put taxes on cell phones and stuff like that. I know they'll do it in Baltimore City and stuff, but it's just never enough money for governments. It's always got to be more and more, and as a resident, I'm sick of it.
Thank you. Ms. Leahy?
Hi. Once again, Amy Leahy. I'm in Severna Park, Maryland. I've lived in Anne Arundel County for 35 years, and I've seen many changes over the years, all of them being in the area of growth and development. I served Anne Arundel County citizens as an employee, 8 years of that in the budget office, where I sat many days in these council chambers listening to the departments presenting their budgets before the county council. I can tell you that services provided now to the good people of this county are not any less than they were over 20 years ago. During that time, the tax cap was voted in by the citizens of the county, and we have not suffered as a result of that. The schools get more and more money each year due to, number one, maintenance of effort passed by the General Assembly in the 1990s, guaranteeing the increase in school funding at the county level, and two, the Board of Education's budget is the only departmental budget the county council can add money to over and above the county executive's recommended amount, and they always do. The fact is, raising taxes on families has a trickle-down effect. Stuart Pittman is recommending an increase in income tax, lifting the ballot-imposed tax cap to fund many new initiatives that during the campaign he said he would be able to afford without tax increases. Families will have less money in their pockets as a result and will have to make decisions about whether to pay for, say, a sports program for their kids or after-school care instead of sending them home to an empty house. The citizens of Anne Arundel County spoke over 20 years ago when they voted in the tax cap, and I believe they still would vote for it again. I ask that you vote for this resolution and limit the local tax rate on Anne Arundel County. And by the way, I don't think that there are any tough decisions in raising people's taxes. That's not a tough decision. That's easy for county.
Okay, thank you. Brooks Shannemeyer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Brooks Shandelmeyer. I live on Stone Creek Road in Annapolis, Maryland. I'm here to oppose Resolution 1892. This resolution is going to hurt the citizens of Anne Arundel County. The fact is, our police department is dangerously underfunded and understaffed. Our fire department is dangerously underfunded and understaffed. Our detention centers are dangerously underfunded and understaffed. Our schools are underfunded and understaffed. This is why we are losing good public employees to every surrounding county that treats their employees well. This resolution is, simply put, going to lead to us having to fire firefighters, police officers, teachers, and detention workers. It is in all practicality anti-public safety and anti-public education. I yield my time.
Thank you. This panel is dismissed. We'll call up the next folks who were signed up, Mr. Ed Irvin and Mr. Torrey Snow. Mr. Irvin, whenever you're ready, name and address in 2 minutes. Thank you.
Ed Irvin, 62 Hall, Annapolis, Maryland, 21403. I was here earlier. I really applaud you, Mr. Volke, to put it back into the voters. I think that you guys to work around the voters on any of this type of legislation. That's why the tax cap was put in. With regards to this specific piece with the income tax, I went over the numbers earlier, but you're up $140 million in 9 years. That's a substantial amount. Nobody's brought up the numbers. The numbers speak for themselves. It's up 2% in 9 years. To go ahead and try, all this fear-mongering, like the other gentleman said, it's just ridiculous. I mean, at the end of the day, the county needs to live within its means. That's what needs to happen here. I mean, it's just every time, keep going back to the property tax guy, keep jacking the local income tax. I mean, that's ridiculous. It's just, I went through each year, fiscal year 2005, all the way through to 2016. I mean, increases 13 million, 23 million, 20 million, 14 million. That's what this county is actually picking up revenue-wise on a year-to-year basis with local income tax. To add to that, I mean, you all can go with the fear-mongering, just like the gentleman said, but at the end of the day, the county needs to live within its means. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Irvin. Mr. Snow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Torrey Snow, 1307 Beltram Court, Odenton, Maryland. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the council. I'm here today to publicly testify in support of Councilman Volke's resolution to allow the public a voice on local tax policy. I've often said that Anne Arundel County residents pay more than a religious tithe in state and local taxes alone. Taxes and fees are so common in our society that most residents could not even list all of the taxes they are currently paying, from utility tax, sales tax, income tax, gas tax, and the taxes built into the cost of services that they use, like rent, medical care, and other professional services. At the local level, property taxes and income taxes already impose a heavy burden on residents. They are especially onerous to the middle-class residents who work hard to bring in a decent income but still struggle to make ends meet. Hearing politicians speak so dismissively of this $500 tax hike reinforces the importance of passing this resolution. The politicians in our county frequently claim a desire to follow the will of the people, yet undercut their own arguments by refusing to give voters a chance to communicate their desires at the ballot box. If these politicians are so confident that aggressive tax hikes are a satisfactory solution to expanding the scope and reach of government, then allowing this measure to go to the ballot box would decisively end the discussion. I challenge the political leadership in our community to abandon a view of contempt for county residents. Instead, embrace the notion that our residents are wise enough to make the right decisions for themselves and their community. Pass this resolution and let the voters decide if they want to give politicians wide open access to their hard-earned money.
Thank you, Mr. Snow. That is all that I have on my list. Is there anyone else that has not signed up would like to come and wish to speak on the public hearing on resolution number 1819? As you all are coming forward again, your name and address, and Madam Secretary will give you a piece of paper to make sure you sign in. There should be enough chairs. Ms. Johnson, why don't you begin, because folks are signing in. We'll work our way over. Is that okay?
I don't have a choice.
You're ready. So.
How do you? I don't know. Okay. Julie Johnson, P.O. Box 6634, Annapolis, Maryland. I am, like many citizens, I want all the services. I want everything. Give me all the best. But then on the other hand, my parents survived the Great Depression. And they were, like many others, they were traumatized by it. Many people, they survived, but they were psychologically impacted. You save. You don't spend what you don't have to spend. Save for a rainy day. And so we're caught between these, opposite tugs and pulls. I would encourage you, there was a book, there's an author named Amity Schlaze who wrote a book in late 1990s, early 2000s, called The Greedy Hand. And it's a discussion of how did we wind up having our taxes withheld? Because, when they first put in income taxes, the first year most people didn't pay. And so, oops, we can't put everybody in jail. And so they turned to the people at the big department stores in New York. And so they had the deal that, get people to withhold them. But if you'll sign up for withholding, well, then we won't fine you and we won't put you in jail. Well, so everybody signed up for withholding. But people have no idea how much is actually withheld. And if they had to actually sit down and write that check every month, there would be a huge hue and cry about, this is a lot, because from her calculations, the average middle-class person was spending a total of close to 50% of their income going out. It's not all called taxes, charges, fees, and so on. So, and we've got huge economic crisis in front of us.
Please summarize, Ms. Johnson.
And so what you need to be looking at is 2027, when you've got all these old people and no money to support them.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Frank?
Hello, my name is Corinne Frank. I live at 8384 Lockwood Road, and I'm a lifetime resident of Pasadena, Maryland. I'm here to support Councilman Volke's resolution, and I would urge every member of this body to consider this. Anne Arundel County passed a tax cap for a reason, and many residents felt secure that this would protect them from increases. During the last election, voters were sold on a frugal farm boy with a chainsaw who taped his boots. What voters were not sold on were huge tax increases. I'm sure you've all read or heard candidate Pittman's remarks that he believed he would not raise taxes to provide services. This is a far cry from the aggressive increases that are being proposed by County Executive Pittman. During the election cycle, I did not hear one candidate run on charging average families hundreds of dollars in tax increases. I am hopeful that you might remember my remarks from the budget hearing meeting regarding the impact higher taxes would have on many working families. That night, I also heard concerns about seniors living on fixed incomes, which is also very concerning. My grandparents, who also lived through the Great Depression, are on fixed incomes. My beloved mom, who is, by the way, a Democrat, is on a fixed income and would be affected. She texted me to state that she is 86 years old and has lived in Anne Arundel County for 45 years. Taxes are hard on all retirees, not just the elderly. We have a lot of bills. Elderly have a lot of sickness and bills. She would like to suggest that no taxes be passed after 80 or 85, laughing out loud. Higher taxes will be a hardship on many families in varying stages of their lives. I have already testified that I support our teachers, and as a mother, I absolutely support my kids within the public school. But there are other courses of action that could be taken in order to keep these promises of frugality. We should prioritize our resources instead of attempting to give everything that everyone wants in one budget cycles. And while I was not old enough to vote in 1992, I would certainly vote for a tax cap now.
Please summarize.
Thank you. I just want to say that I do appreciate everyone who's reached out to me on both sides of the aisle about this issue, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Heather Bagnall.
Thank you. Heather Bagnall, 967 Phillips Drive, Arnold, Maryland. I'm not going to reiterate some of the other points that have been made because I think they've been quite valid. But I want to talk a little bit about why I oppose this as a referendum vote. Because referendums sound really great. They sound like democracy. We're putting it to the voters. But generally, referendum questions are fairly straightforward. And the budget is our primary function: vetting, approving, figuring out how to meet all of our services. And I'm a big picture person. I think all of you are big picture people. That's why you were elected. And we elected our representatives to make the hard decisions, to make the hard choices, to do the research, to understand every aspect of what you're voting on. But what we want to do today with this resolution is put to the voters a question of understanding the impact of the entire budget of Anne Arundel County. Now, our Congress has not managed to pass a budget in years. We have 7 members of the county council that spend months working on this budget, which is a budget that you get from multiple members of the county executive's office. And I think it is an unfair expectation to expect every voter to understand the nuance of every decision of that budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brown.
Thank you very much. Again, County Council members, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to speak to you about this. I oppose this proposal for a referendum, and maybe just make a few points very quickly. One, I'm asking the County Council to be fiscally responsible and listen and heed the warnings and the statements made by our county executive representative. We want to protect our standing in the financial community, and I'm asking you to think about being fiscally responsible so that you have the flexibility to respond to the community's needs. There was a statement, live within our means. No, I'm asking you to give us the means to serve our community and the needs of our children and other citizens in our community. I was here last time where the budget was discussed and the folks came up and talked, and there must have been 30, 40 people. There were 2 or 3 that were opposed to raising the taxes. The vast majority knew full well that there would be an increase in taxes to support our schools, and they support our schools. They're willing to pay the cost. I am willing to pay the cost to serve my community, and I'm asking you to have flexibility in your decision making. The Kerman Commission, not to rehash, but it's going to barely bring us to mediocre. We want to be better than that. We need to have more resources to excel, to put Maryland back where it used to be. So I'm asking you to support our community. I am not voting for stagnation. I am not voting for starvation. I am voting for the future. I want this county council to invest in our children, to invest in our communities, and not just have buzzwords, lower taxes, as if we're supposed to respond Pavlovian-like, oh goody, I don't get to pay taxes. Meanwhile, the sacrifice
Please summarize.
is great. I oppose this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Enright.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council, and ladies of the staff. My name is Patrick Enright from 2052 Huntwood Drive in Gambrels. At this moment, Ms. Gray is passing out a written submission of testimony on the salient points of my opposition to Resolution 18-19. But I want to say something else. I strongly believe that constitutions and charters are only frameworks for governing. They are not repositories for misfit statutes. They are not repositories, certainly, for failed initiatives in the statutory process by either executives or legislators. Such initiatives emanating from that process and embedding in the ballot tend to flummox voters into voting for something just because it's on the ballot. It must be in their best interests, and therefore they vote for it only to regret it down the pike when the results, unintended consequences, come back to bite them. I believe that charters and constitutions need to be massaged and tweaked and torqued on occasion, but I submit only for the betterment and the efficiency of governing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Enright. Ms. Britt.
My name is Amy Britt. I live at 600 River Birch Court in Odenton, Maryland. I had 2 quick points I wanted to make. One, I haven't lived in this county for 20 years, but I have lived here for 11. And I have an interesting perspective because my stepchildren are 9 and 10 years older than my son and have gone to the same schools. So I can tell you that absolutely the quality of education in this county has gone down. Second, Delegate Bagnall covered this a little bit, but I did want to say that the budget is incredibly complicated. And I know that the 7 of you know this because you've been working on it for the better part of a month. The idea of putting it to a vote for many people, everyone who's not going to bother to sit there and read the line items and decide how much will be taxed is crazy. It's a terrible idea. That's why we elect you. We elect you to do this work, to really learn the budget and decide what's best. And so I'd like to say, as a citizen of Anne Arundel County and a middle-class taxpayer in Anne Arundel County, if you need to raise my taxes to improve my quality of life, please do that.
Thank you. This panel's dismissed. Is there anyone else that'd like to come testify on Resolution 1819? Okay, seeing no other movement in the audience, Madam Secretary, we're going to close the public hearing on Resolution 1819. Could you please read the title of Resolution 1819?
Resolution number 1819, a resolution entitled Charter Amendment, Budgetary and Fiscal Procedures, Income Tax.
Okay, there is discussion. Councilman Volke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I noted earlier, I was going to reserve my remarks because I did want to hear from the public and get an opportunity to get a sense of how people were thinking. But I did want to share a number of points about this, this particular charter resolution. So, first, I want to talk about substance versus procedure. I've heard a lot of people who have talked about the procedural positives or negatives of this particular resolution. And while I can understand that there are two sides to the issue, and obviously I come out on one side, but I respect that people come out on the other side, frankly, the heart of this issue is the question of whether or not the voters should have a say in this. That is really the crux of this. And so the discussion on substance, frankly, puts the cart before the horse, is what it does. Because the substantive argument should be one that is made to the voters if and when this winds up on the ballot. And if the voters, as I believe they are smart enough and have enough concept of how government works and how taxes should function and how budgets operate, then they are going to dig into this and take an opportunity to look at it one way or the other and decide if it fits with their particular worldview. I think that, frankly, to argue otherwise suggests a disturbing lack of faith in the people who put all of us up here. And if you have that lack of faith, I'm not really sure how you're in elected office, candidly, because the people who put us here, we assume, obviously knew well enough to pick us as the people to represent them. And so if you don't believe that, then I think that fundamentally gets to a question of what are we doing here? We are elected by people. We are elected to represent them. We are elected to make tough choices. But that does not mean that the power of the people is completely surrendered to their elected officials. If you read the United States Constitution, if you read our charter, there are rights that are still reserved to individuals. I mean, it's not as though we say, government, you're the all-powerful Leviathan, and therefore you are able to make all choices for us. So I don't see anything procedurally wrong with putting this in front of the voters and giving them the opportunity to weigh in. And I think that that really ties into the next point that I would argue, which is that this is, at this moment, this particular budget that's in front of us is an inflection point in our county. And I argue that because at this moment, we are going to change in some form or fashion if we choose to adopt the proposals that are included in the current county executive budget. Why do I say that? Well, we're going to create new floors for what we must spend on education funding. And that's not to say that I'm against education. I heard one gentleman say, this is anti-public safety, this is anti-education. No, it's actually not. Frankly, I argued in my campaign and said to my voters that we would continue incrementally improving those services. And I expect to continue to support that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you go out and tell everybody, hey, now we have to increase your taxes substantially. So by doing this, we've created a new floor, is what we're doing with this particular budget. Additionally, I would go back. A lot of people have noted the 1992 referendum with respect to the property tax cap, and at that time, over 70% of the voters in this county approved it. Now, if I'm wrong, which I think there are many people up here who believe that I am wrong, who believe that this last election was a referendum on tax policy in this county. I don't necessarily agree with that, and I read the Capitol's editorial today, and they obviously believe that it was as well. If I'm wrong, the voters are going to tell me that. When this goes onto the ballot in 2020, the voters are going to resoundingly reject this, and we will see that this county does want that inflection point and does not want this property tax cap. I would posit to you that, in fact, The voters do want it, and therein lies the concern of everyone who is against this. The idea that if it goes to the voters, that the voters may actually say, we don't want increased taxes. Despite what it is that you are proposing to spend the money on, we don't want it at that cost. And I think that that is frankly the concern of most people who are opposed to this. Again, this is not what the county executive campaigned on, at least from every piece of literature, every campaign event that I went to, and every sort of statement that I heard or read about for this past election. And candidly, I don't know which of my colleagues also campaigned on this. I am unclear as to who stood up in front of the voters and said, I'm willing to raise your taxes. If you did that, then I give you a lot of credit, and I say stand by that, because if you ran on that and people elected you on that, so be it. I did not. I campaigned and I promised the people of my district that I would, in fact, oppose new taxes. And that's what I'm doing here. And that's what I intend to continue doing. And I was elected by, frankly, a large majority of voters in my district who I believe support that idea. And I think that given the closeness of the county executive race, for one to argue that there was some overwhelming mandate for the county executive, who again did note things in his campaign talking points about cutting budgets, about doing more with less. He even said that in his actual inaugural address. He stood up at Maryland Hall where 2 months prior he had said, I think there are enough revenues that we can continue to support the services that we need, but also grow things where we need them. He said, we can do that, and I don't think we need more taxes. He stood on that same stage just under 2 months later, and he said, we need to do more with less. That's the important thing in this county. And then we got the budget. And that was not at all what came out of that budget. So I think, frankly, that is the concern of opponents, is that I may be right, and that actually the majority of voters in this county may not support these increased taxes. And if that's your concern, well, then I guess I could understand it if you don't want that check on what it is that we're doing. But I think we need that check. I would also note that for people who are theoretically opposed to caps or their limit on flexibility, Mr. Enright's written testimony actually points this out, and I would point it out to everybody. We already have a cap. There's a 3.2% income tax cap that is the limit of what any county is allowed to do in the state. So candidly, if we think that caps as a theoretical idea are such a handicap and such an impediment to local governments and their ability to fund and have flexibility, well then I don't know what we're going to say to our friends down the street in the General Assembly who have put this cap on us, because it's already there and it already exists. And there's nothing that says that a county can't go further and impose an additional cap on themselves. But you as a county, we as a county, cannot go above 3.2%. That is the maximum that we are allowed under state law. So again, for all those who would say how fiscally irresponsible a cap is and how terrible of an idea it is, I would direct you to the state law as presently written. The other thing that I would note about this particular provision is there's some beauty in its simplicity. What this will do is dictate that county revenues are unable to grow faster than the revenues of individuals in this county and their income. If you tie the income tax at 2.5% of income, and today you make $100,000, the county gets a certain percentage, and I won't try to do the math here in front of you. If you go forward and someone now makes $105,000, the county is still going to get 2.5% of that. So there will continue to be an increased revenue. However, the amount that is hitting that person has not changed. The actual amount that is touching them from a percentage point is not different. So if there's some argument that the county will never have more money, frankly, the county will have more money as taxpayers in this county continue to do better. And that will continue to allow us to grow government at the rate that we are seeing individuals' incomes grow. And why is that important? Well, I'll note two things for you in this particular budget. The budget analysts, the smart people that we have in the budget office, and the Spending Affordability Committee have noted that we should expect to see incomes for regular county residents increase at about 3.75%. Alternatively, this budget grows county spending by nearly 7%. We are substantially outpacing the rate at which people are making money. And again, I note that people say, well, you know, it's only $558 when you put together the income and the property tax. That's a lot of money. That really is. And if you believe otherwise, then you may have more money than any of us up here, or at least maybe me. But my concern is that has a real impact on the bottom line. I would also talk about the individuals who, some of them former members of this body, who've written some op-eds in the newspaper discussing their sort of seeing of the light on what a foolish idea decreasing tax rates is. I want to note that when she was a councilwoman, now Senator Bidel actually voted in one of those years where we decreased the property tax below the maximum threshold. But now all of a sudden she has decided that this is fiscally irresponsible and a very, very big mistake. And I believe, though I'm not positive, but I'm pretty sure Councilman Benoit did the same thing. But again, he's seen the light too. It's interesting to me that now all of a sudden people can say what a foolish idea this was when it wasn't so foolish when they voted for it before. And the last thing that I'll leave all of you with is this. I want to direct you to section 1202 of our charter. 1202 permits a petition process to amend the county charter by way of a petition with 10,000 signatures. And so when this fails, which I anticipate it will this evening, and when we do not pass this through this council, I anticipate spending the better part of the next 18 months gathering these signatures. And then pursuant to the terms of 1202, I'll deliver them to Councilman Pruski, who will then, well, if he's the chair or whoever else is.
I'm not going to be the chair.
All right, fair. But I will deliver them to the chair. And at that point, we can get this on the ballot and people can have their voice heard. This is not the end of this fight. And so I would urge all of my colleagues, as we look at the budget and as we go forward and all of these concerns that everyone has about having to cut back spending, realize that this is coming down the pipe and this will be on the horizon. And I would urge all of you to look at what it is that we are spending on in this county. Because frankly, I think that the voters of this county support what I'm trying to do. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. And it will happen. And I understand it. But I don't think I am, because I do not believe that either candidate running for county executive ever expressly made the point that they were going to raise taxes to voters, and people did not vote for that. So with that, I would urge all of my colleagues to vote for this, and I appreciate your support.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All right. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on resolution number 1819.
Ms. Lacey.
I am in the unenviable position that could not be avoided of having to address this first, and I just can't find myself to not give some kind of explanation for why I wholeheartedly disagree with this resolution, and I would encourage my colleagues likewise to vote it down. If Mr. Volke and whoever else agrees can manage to get the 10,000 signatures for the citizens to directly petition that this amendment be made through an election in 2020, more power to them. I dare you, bring it on. Because when you talk about 1992 being the year that the citizens of this county voted by 70+% to impose the property tax revenue cap, number one, they could have also imposed an income tax cap. That could have been part of the discussion. But number two, that was a presidential election year, and I think that if you're thinking that 2020 is going to be like 1992, my opinion is you're sorely wrong. So show it. And I say all that because I guess the gloves are off. When my colleagues sit here at the dais and they make personal attacks or impugn the character of their colleagues who are, we believe, I thought, all here just trying to do the best job, and I certainly gave you the benefit of the doubt, Mr. Volke, and I still will, and I still do. But I am going to call out that when the arguments that are being made here are incomplete, inconsistent, without enough facts and full of assumptions. My mom taught me that when you make an assumption, there was a certain expression I'm just not going to repeat here on TV about what that means. And frankly, that's how I feel about this resolution. I also think that, voters, when you say, did you promise your voters before the election that you would not raise taxes? I think my 3 Republican colleagues have unfortunately put themselves in a position where you're kind of in a pickle. You didn't leave yourself choices where you could consider that possibly you would come to learn different information that you didn't have access to before you were elected. And if, Mr. Volke, you didn't make this specific promise before you were elected, I don't think you can fairly call out our county executive for having made a decision that sounds to you like a broken promise when he said was, I believe, based on the facts that were available to him at the time. And I also think that he was entirely attempting to say that in good faith. And I think if the shoe was on the other foot, literally, you might make a different choice. I would also ask the citizens, including, really everyone across the county, because I have received lots of comments about the overall tax discussion from my constituents as well as those throughout the county. And some of the things, that are said here tonight and that are said in those emails, they're frankly alarming because they're just, the fear-mongering is always disingenuous. By definition, that's what fear-mongering is. It is selling fear to obtain something that the person who's selling the fear wants to have because they then exercise more control over other people. But that's not what self-government is about, which I also thought was a Republican principle that I would agree with, but I think it doesn't have to be Republican or Democratic. Ms. Johnson made the comment that if you don't consider, as I understood it, about the taxes, she said in 2027, we'll have all these old people and no money to support them. I thought that was a really interesting comment because in 1992, the voters who are still here, who were there then, are now old people, and I think we're saying I'm hearing from them, they don't have the money to support themselves, and we're also hearing from young people and people of all generations that in fact our public services are not at the standard that they should be for the 3rd wealthiest county in this state. And every time anyone suggests that we should cap a tool that we have in our toolbox to be able to address changing circumstances without acknowledging the cuts that you would have to actually make to make good on that promise, you've lost all your credibility with me. And I'm sorry to have to say that, but I think you're adding fuel to the fire in a way that is seriously unproductive for this country, for this county, and that, if your constituents want lower tax rates, the place they really should take that to is to Congress, because I hope you're responsibly informing them that the largest, by far, percentage of the taxes that they pay are federal for maintaining wars that we've been in now for, a better part of 2 decades, or for all kinds of other projects across the country in areas with lower tax rates, or what we know to be a redistribution from blue states to red states. So I hope you're trying to have a complete argument with your or discussion with your constituents when you mention those kinds of things, because they need to know that their wealth is getting redistributed across the country on a grand scale, when where we are is we're talking about a fraction. If you took away the federal portion and you looked at what our local money can do for our local community, the people we live with, then you would be able to see from a much different perspective that there's a reason why our charter says we come up with our expenditures and then we set the tax rates. Is to meet those, is we're required to do it to balance the budget, which other levels of government are not. And so, with all of that being said, I vote no.
Excuse me, I'm in roll call vote.
We're in the middle of voting, please.
Ms. Pickard?
No.
Mr. Volke?
Aye.
Ms. Fiedler?
I'd like to take a moment to just address some things that I heard here tonight.
Great.
I've talked to my colleague on numerous occasions because there was some reservation on my part in regards to the bond rating. Having said that, a comment was made tonight that this resolution only protects the politicians. I think what we have here this evening is just a difference of opinion, and that is okay. For me, I think it's an effort to protect the taxpayers. I also heard that a vast majority of folks who have come out to these hearings support tax increases. If that's the case, that will show up at the ballot box when we put this in front of voters. I also heard we elected you, and I was elected, and I ran on lower taxes over higher taxes, and I won't go back on my word. The county executive has done a great job at increasing transparency and kind of showing the budget process and showing how things work. Maybe the county has changed, and that's why I support throwing this to the voters and letting them cast their ballot. This is not a decision that makes sets the cap this evening. This just allows the voters to have a say, and I do support that. Aye.
Mr. Rodvian?
I just want to start out by saying we are not a direct democracy. We are a representative democracy. We are representative, each of us, of our constituents in our district. Each member of this council has 4 binders right now, each several hundred pages long, containing the budget. So I believe if we are going to put the question to the voters of should we set our tax rate permanently and forever at a level of 2.5%, then they also need to have the say on every single line item in that budget. For example, are voters okay with continuing to move towards larger class sizes around the county? As many of you know, I'm a public school teacher. I have already taught classes over 40 students and over 50 students. This is not fear-mongering of what might come. This is the facts about what is. I have seen many good colleagues leave the county because pay is not keeping up. I have heard about fire department response times of police officers having to work overtime because their departments are insufficiently staffed. So if we were to put those questions to the voters, are you okay with leaving our public schools understaffed, our classrooms crowded, our schools in decay, with $1 billion of backlog needed to take care of our public facilities? If we put all of those questions to the voters and they still come down on the side of a 2.5% tax rate, so be it. But I really don't believe that is the will of the voters. In fact, I think those of us who won our elections, many of us campaigned on things that were exactly the opposite, on bringing class sizes down, on bringing our school buildings into the 21st century, on not having fire stations with only one firefighter and having to pull from different parts of the county or even neighboring counties on a regular basis. Everything has a context. Anyone that has ever purchased a car knows this. You can buy the cheapest car available. You could go online and you could find a car for $150. In fact, I bet if you pulled out your cell phones right now and searched it up, you could find a car for $150. But that car is not going to drive you anywhere. You have to have a car with an engine. You have to have a car with brakes and turn signals and headlights. And those things are going to cost a little bit. I do not consider myself a person who is frivolous with money. I am definitely not someone who is frivolous with other people's money. I am combing through every line of this budget looking for things that I think may not be necessary, mainly for the purpose to fund other things that I think are necessary and that weren't funded by the county executive's budget, although I think overall the county executive's budget is excellent. But I'm doing what I was elected to do, and that is to go line by line, looking through this budget to do what is right for the people in this community. For me, again, as a public school teacher, this especially includes children. If every child in this county currently had the ability and the resources around them to reach their highest potential, I might be okay with a cap of 2.5%, but that's not where we are. So the assertion that because I'm a Democrat, I wouldn't adopt or I wouldn't accept any cap is just not true. I just don't think this could possibly be the cap given the state of the public services in our county. I'm not going to leave a county, I'm not going to support a budget so bare-boned that children who have less have no way of getting ahead, who have no way of coming out of intergenerational poverty. And if we were in a position where every county resident, could move forward, had the resources to have a prospering and fulfilling life, then I might be willing to consider this. But that is simply not the case. We do not have a perfectly clean environment. Our schools are in not great shape. We are constantly struggling to hold on to good public employees, and all of those things combined, I'm going to do my due diligence and do what I was elected to do, and I'm going to go through the budget and support the things that we need as a county, and I'm going to do what I can to make that as inexpensive as possible, but I'm also going to support that if we need to pay for those things.
What is your vote, Ms. Rodine? I'm not being smart. I need the yay or nay.
No.
Okay. Ms. Hare.
Thank you. I'll try and keep this brief. I think the very fact that we have such differences of opinion up here highlights the need to send this to the voters. We rely on the voters to understand their priorities, and I trust that voters consider things like class sizes, public services in making a vote on a referendum such as this. We've talked earlier tonight about all parties coming to the table and giving notice to people who might be affected by legislation that comes out of this council or by the budget and whatnot. I can think of almost no better notice than to put something on a ballot to directly allow the voters to weigh in on. For these reasons, I think it's important to hear directly from the voter on this and to note that passing this resolution doesn't put the tax cap in effect. It simply says to the voter, we'd like to hear from you what you think about this and how much of your money you'd like us to spend. So for those reasons, I'll vote yes.
Mr. Pruski?
Nay.
3 in the affirmative, 4 in the negative. Resolution 1819 is defeated.
Is there any other business to be brought before the county council? May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Motion carries. County council is adjourned until June 3rd, 2019. Thank you and have a good evening.